of Peace Leaf. So before we get started, we just want to thank the administration and the council for all the work that they put in up to the 22nd meeting and then from the 22nd until today. We know it's been a lot of work and we will try and be as concise as we can. So we do have some points we really agree with. We do agree with the reduction of the business license fee from $5,000 to $2,500. And we do agree that with the additional buffer zone from high schools at 300 meters, we think that's going to be very important in eliminating the black market, which is another primary concern for Peace Leaf. So today, are you planning on separating the business license and the land use bylaws again?
Go ahead and make your entire presentation, because we won't be having the public hearing portion. We'll just be moving on to second and third reading on the other.
Okay, perfect. So with the business licenses, where our main issue is with the number of licenses that are proposed. So we would like to increase the limit of retail licenses from 10 to 15, and we do have a few reasons for this. So as we know right now, there's at least 12 entities applying for licenses. Setting a limit at 10 would limit or just restrict people from being able to compete in the market. There's no business license caps in relation to cannabis retail stores in any other city in Alberta. We are unsure what unconsidered side effects may arise from having a restrictive cap. We understand the need for a cautious approach, but we feel a limit of 10 is too restrictive. As citizens of Grande Prairie, eliminating the black market and reducing cannabis use in minors is a primary focus for us. More licenses will put pressure on the illegal black market, which is a primary source for youth to purchase cannabis. As Councillor Bressie mentioned in his blog post was, if cannabis retail stores can make cannabis less attractive to some teens while making access more difficult for all, that would be a real win for the community. This was in relation to teenagers being able to get access to liquor cannabis a lot easier than they're able to get access to liquor right now. So a large concern from enforcement services is the increase of intoxicated drivers. A higher cap for retail license will reduce the chance of consumers driving intoxicated, as it will be a shorter distance from home to store on average. And those are our main points with relation to the business licenses. We do have one concern with the land use bylaws. So we would like to revert the development authority from the council's IPS, the Infrastructure and Protective Services Committee, back to the development officer, except for in the commercial transition and the commercial local districts. So these districts, these three that we would like reverted, are the general commercial, central commercial, and the arterial commercial. We have a couple reasons for that. The first one is having the IPS committee as the decision-making authority will add time and pressure to businesses. The report process takes a minimum of 3 weeks and hours of staff time. We do not feel this process is necessary for every location. We do believe this process is very appropriate for the commercial transition and local commercial districts, but not for the other ones. So the city has already encouraged a large cost developing the framework for cannabis. Having the IPS as the authority would only increase the costs and the time. So having the development officer as the decision-making authority will reduce costs and time. If there's any questions or concerns, the development officer always has the ability to push it up to the IPS, and we trust that they would do that if there was a need. And we can take any questions. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the presentation. Council, any questions for the delegation? Any questions, Council? I don't see anybody in the queue, so I think your points came across clearly. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, gentlemen. Thank you.
Okay, so that's the end of our delegations who let us know ahead of time that they wish to attend. Was there anybody else that wished to attend to speak on relation to cannabis-related issues? Okay, so I saw a few hands there, sort of like tic-tac-toe. I'll start from this side of the room and I'll work my way across, so please. And you've sort of seen the routine. If you can introduce yourselves for our reporter. I want to say court reporter. That's not the case, but ladies, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, and other attendees. I am Tia Shabbat, my business partner, Raylan Robichaud, and again, we are here representing Hayes Inc. We are again asking council to reconsider 2 bylaws. So similar to everybody else, the first bylaw is C-106-4H, and under section B, you're only the licensing thing, the 10 licenses and a max per 2 separate business entities. So our perception is this will encourage all business owners to submit at least 2 licenses, which could ultimately lead to only 5 licensees of AGL's approval of 15 approvals to be granted in Grande Prairie. It will severely limit, like it was already recommended, people that have spent lots of money to get one of these licenses if only 5 are selected. So we had recommended that perhaps we open that number from 10 to 12. When we looked at the 15 licenses that AGLC had approved, there were 2 companies that had 3 licenses pending. So if we assume that, then 12 would essentially allow each business to open 1 license and be granted that in that 12 cap. Or the alternative is that we would only allow 1 licensee or 1 entity to own a business in Grande Prairie. And then the second one is, again, the hours of operation. We addressed this at the first council meeting and we were declined at 2 a.m. So again, we're coming back that we would like to fall under the same guidelines as liquor stores, but if the inability to be till 2 a.m., we would ask that we would be allowed to be open until midnight. Again, talking about the black market and trying to reduce the ability to get that on the black market. And we also believe that there is a price or revenue to be generated in those hours. And so it is a decrease to small businesses from a revenue perspective. So again, that's what we would recommend, is for it to be allowed to allow us to be open to the public in a safe fashion to distribute to the public. And we felt that, as the comment was made, that liquor stores felt that those later hours perhaps were the most unsafe, that we should be given the same ability to dictate our own hours and the own safety of our stores. Like it was already said, the security measures that we have to take to secure our stores, the facilities, the vaults, the safes is much larger than liquor stores that are allowed to open till 2 a.m. Those are our 2 points.
Thanks very much, ladies. Any questions for the delegation? I just had one.
Sure.
You mentioned the 15 that AGLC has approved. So I'm hearing slightly different numbers about what AGLC has approved, and so can you just sort of give me a reference point of where you got the 15 number?
So AGLC hasn't approved 15 because you need city approval, but 15 people have put licenses in, and they've shown up on the AGLC page for people to argue about, and the time has passed. So those 15 people, if they get city approval, would be allowed to have stores.
I want to ask administration a question on this. What information do we have about the number of applications that have gone in front of AGLC? Mr. Renault?
So the delegation's correct in that there's been 15 15 applicants that have been tentatively approved through AGLC pending municipal approvals. However, some of those applicants have multiple locations. So there's 15. To the last time I checked, I believe there was 22 proposed locations, and administration's aware of several others that are still to proceed.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get a clarification on the numbers there. Okay, thanks very much. Were there any other questions for the delegation?
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thanks very much, ladies. Okay, so we're moving sort of my right to my left, and we'll come here. Welcome. You've sort of seen the routine. If you could introduce yourself again for anybody that's watching and our audience.
Sure, I'm
Welcome.
just going to set my timer too. Thank you, Mayor Given, councillors. My name is Amanda Reimer, and I am a business person within the city of Grande Prairie. I couldn't quite put my finger on when initially I heard about the municipal level or the municipal regulation, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was that didn't sit well with me. And so I formulated this report, and my apologies, but I did email it to every councillor in the interest of saving trees. So I can read it out if you'd like me to, if you haven't read your email yet, or I can just summarize it.
I'm sure we're okay with summarizing if you want to hit the high points. So you make sure you get the points that you really want to get in.
So yeah, the high points for me are that the federal government has taken a very cautious approach with legislating this issue. And youth safety has been paramount, as well as strict regulation. the federal government has committed to invest $46 million over 5 years, as well as the 75% that's to be transferred back to the provinces. Now, I recognize that the provinces haven't made a commitment with respect to that 75%. However, it was the express intent of the federal government that the money flow directly to the municipalities. The question arose at last council's meeting about whether it's the responsibility of the general tax base to absorb the cost of legislation. I would emphatically state, yes, it is. The commercial taxes that are generated as a result of any new business will pay into the property tax base, and they do pay their fair share. One of the core functions of the municipal government is to oversee the development and operation of systems and provide the framework with which to deliver the services to the community. The business community is part of the whole community. Cost recovery does not seem reasonable. It's not a practice that I'm aware of. You've adopted in the past. If that were the case, when the dog bylaw was amended this year, did you guys levy every dog owner who pays property tax for a separate issue to recoup administrative charges of editing that legislation? That's the cost at a municipal level of you guys doing business. The comparables, I get the need to travel to various districts and totally support that. Again, do you guys, when you're doing, or has the city established a cost recovery process whereby when you educate and encourage your staff to be professionally developed every year, do you, whatever department that pertains to, do you assess, do you levy it back to the taxpayers? So I don't think that that's very fair to just specifically target cannabis, and I would make the presumption because of the content, like the subject content of the matter. There's no justification, and this was my issue at the last meeting with respect to a $5,000 licensing fee. I get that it was cut in half, and it doesn't matter if it's a barrier in your perception. That's not the issue. The issue is, why are cannabis retail facilities being unduly punished for the subject matter of their business venture? At the end of the day, it's a legal matter. It becomes law at a federal level. It has been cautiously enacted. It's flowed down to the province, and then it flows down to the municipality. Our vision is a community of excellence that embraces challenges and opportunities, as well as demonstrating equity and fairness. I don't think that it's fair to the cannabis, the pending cannabis industry. You know, we rely on a report that targets a sample size of 2.69% of our population, and I alluded to that at the last meeting too, is that begs two questions. The community wasn't engaged or didn't know what's going on, or they just don't care. Like it's not as important as it seems to think. The comments on the committee report was that it is regulation inspection, or is expected that the public consumption of cannabis products will increase. Regulation, inspection, and enforcement will be necessary to ensure any consequences of cannabis legalization are mitigated. Absolutely, and that has been well taken care of at a federal and a provincial level. However, this statement is highly inflammatory. There is absolutely no supporting data in that report to justify that demand will increase. We don't know. I mean, there's presumptions, absolutely, but then where's 3 scenarios or 3 different ways that things could pay out? So in closing, I've got 16 seconds. Once the Cannabis Act is proclaimed its law, it is a challenge to establish local laws in advance of the pending federal ones. However, overregulation does not seem warranted considering the careful approach of the federal government, the extremely low survey response, and the low public attendance at the last Save Cannabis Retailers at the last public hearing. The constant references to prohibition and proceeding cautiously should not be considered as one issue. A cautious approach is alleged to permit the city to monitor the impact and reduce in the future if too restrictive. Constant suggestions comparing alcohol prohibition to cannabis prohibition are inconsistent, considering the constant rejection of any comparison of retail cannabis stores to retail liquor stores. In closing, the county debated this the other day. They're charging a $500 one-time development permit fee, no annual business license fee. I submit there should not be a licensing fee for retail cannabis stores, just as there is not one for liquor stores. There should be a one-time development permit fee that is not punitive and is comparable to existing retail permitting fees. There should not be any restrictions on number of licenses issued. Let the free market sort that out. It's not the responsibility of the municipality through its vision and mission endeavors to support private business. Restricting the free market is counterproductive to economic development. Thank you.
Good job. Well, good job fitting it all in. Any questions for the delegation? Any questions for the delegation?
No.
Don't see any. No. Okay. No. Thanks very much. Thanks for the presentation. Okay. So I was moving my right to my left. So I guess I'm. Oh. Okay. Back there. Sure, gentlemen.
Your Worship, Council, thank you very much. My name is Hugh Traris. I'm not here to speak about the retail side of things, which was why I didn't speak at the last meeting either, but almost to my own detriment. So I'd like to today just give you a little bit of information perhaps, or mention that there is another type of business that could exist under this. In the last meeting, we talked about a change in zoning for producers. I represent a group that is interested in obtaining a license, become a licensed producer under the ACMPR here in Grande Prairie. And in the last meeting, we had discussion about what the optics might look like if we had an Aurora-sized grow here in Grande Prairie. So to perhaps change the zoning around that. And I'd just like to mention that there is a different type of business that could also exist under the licensed producer. What I'm interested in, my background is chemical engineering, and what I'm looking to try and bring to the city of Grande Prairie is an extraction facility. So I would be licensed under the ACMPR as a licensed producer, but I would be working with other licensed producers to take their dried cannabis and convert it into cannabis oil. And my size, the size of my facility could be extremely small, 2,000, 3,000 square feet. I could be very discreet. So the concern over optics of having an Aurora-sized grow, I completely understand. But just when it comes to talking about zoning for producers, I just like to make that known that a small, discrete business could also exist under that regime.
Thanks very much for the presentation. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. I know that the discussion over potentially taking this out of the land use bylaw was brought up by the chamber, and they cited potential infrastructure stress on power and sewer and water. Can you just comment on the usage of your potential business compared to other businesses that might exist?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know with a grow, you could imagine that the demands on water, electricity would be massive, right? You know, we're in northern Alberta, so to you know, grow cannabis, you really grow any plant that's not native to this region, you would have considerable amount of power requirements alone. Where I exist as an extraction facility only, my focus would be around using critical carbon dioxide at critical temperature and pressure to act as a solvent. So really my use of water would be comparable to any other business for the most part. And, you know, my equipment would also, it would definitely generate or draw quite a bit of electricity. I would have to run chillers, etc. But I don't imagine that would be any different than, you know, a welding shop or, you know, a regular chemical facility.
Any other questions for the delegation? I had one. So right now, as things stand, what zones do you see your facility fitting in currently?
General industrial is what I would be most focused at, and I'm trying to focus more around the outskirts of Grand Prairie, just on the borders, I think, for multiple reasons.
So general and rather than heavy industrial, like it,
Yeah,
okay.
yes. And right now we are going through trying to locate an exact facility, which is why I wanted to make sure that I brought it up, that, you know, that we don't lose the zoning before we've narrowed something down.
Okay. So to be specific, your request would be that production facilities of some nature be allowed in the industrial general district.
Absolutely.
That's the request. Okay. Okay. Councillor Bressie?
Thank you. And I just want to clarify, as the proposed bylaws currently state, you don't see any problems. You're just here proactively hoping that nothing gets changed.
Absolutely.
I don't see anybody else in the queue with questions. No? Then thanks very much for your presentation this evening. Thank you. Okay. There we go. Now we're about middle of the room. Welcome. If you'll introduce yourself again so we can make sure that we've got your name for the record, and welcome.
Good evening, Council. My name is Levon Pearson, and I'm an independent franchise owner with Spirit Leaf. I've been a resident of Grand Prairie for the past 15 years. First off, I just want to say that I was disappointed with the outcome of with the decision to throw out the overlay map on the basis I chose my location to comply with the map. My location was in one of the approved areas and wasn't affected by any of the other proposed bylaws, so I felt like it was in good shape moving forward. To reiterate on what pretty much everyone else has been saying, I also feel like the 10 license cap is not enough. I also don't think the the city should be putting an arbitrary cap on the free market. If it ends up going to the cap route, I hope they do increase the number of licenses. I just want to touch on the concern about the 15 applicants are approved. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Sure, there are 15 applicants who have been posted on the AGLC. I've been watching it very closely. I was the first application submitted on March 6th, so I've been keeping a close eye on that. I recently had, at the beginning of the month, I was in Edmonton with the AGLC due diligence team for my in-person meeting. A few stressful days later, I got the phone call telling me I have been approved the due diligence portion of the application process. So now my license is pending on the municipality. So now that there is 15 licenses posted on the AGLC website, that doesn't necessarily mean all 15 are going to pass the AGLC due diligence portion. So I just wanted to clarify that. But if it ends up going to lottery, I think it's not the right way to do things. I feel like lottery, it will end up leading to having the luckiest rather than the best run business. And another concern with that is what happens if all the lottery winners are all congested within the same area of town? Because I know one of the big concerns last meeting was having accessibility throughout the city. So I was wondering what would happen if that were the case. Yeah, those were my main points there. Sorry about that. So yeah, I would propose if it does go to lottery, the initial intake, that the applicants must have proved that they have passed the AGL due diligence portion, because it doesn't seem fair for businesses like myself who have passed the approved due diligence portion and was compliant with the overlay map initially to potentially lose out on a license as someone who A, hasn't applied yet to the AGLC, or B, someone who ends up not getting approved. So those are my concerns.
Okay, thanks very much for the presentation. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'm wondering if you could just tell me, how long did it take you from when you first submitted your application to the AGLC to when you passed that and you got permission?
So yeah, I applied on the March 6th was the first day that they were accepting applications, and I had my meeting on June 4th.
And have you heard from others going through it, or from the industry, or from them, if that process is taking longer or shorter now? That
I couldn't answer that for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the delegation? I don't see anybody else in the queue, so thanks very much for your presentation this evening. Thank you. Okay, over halfway at the back there, sir, and if you'd like to come forward.
City Council.
Have a seat and introduce yourself. The mics won't pick you up if you're standing up there.
Hi, City Councilors, Mayor. My name's Paul Skopik. I'm here just like everybody else as an entrepreneur. Uh, for once in my life, I would like to agree with everything you guys are doing. Being proactive, setting your times from 10 to 10. I understand myself, there's no such thing as this prime hour of doing business. What's going to matter in taking out the black market, for my research and everything that I do know, is price point, price point, price point. The hours of 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. have no little regard whether you're going to take it out or not. It's the price point. It's whether you're doing business with Walmart, Amazon, it's price point. Hours, it's something to address later. Like, I love my city for being proactive on what they're doing. Let's just not open the doors and everything else like that. This, starting a business like this, we all took, I guess, the chance that things couldn't go right. It was a lot of money we all have online, our families, and the rest of our futures. I still believe in the 10 applications. I believe the zoning and areas and where they can be laid out can be better looked at, I guess, with more help from counselors and business people coming into this. And I still only, the fact that one license per entity, I can't be like a big Aurora try and come in here and because I have the financials. Like, some of us do have the finance, but we don't have to all have $500,000 to go into play on this. Like, and God bless the kids and everything else for trying to get into this, but this has been a lot of money, a lot of time. I believe that we have to do this correctly. This thing about security and that, oh yeah, I'm looking at $7,000 to $10,000. But it's something I have to incur to know that my future goes forward. Not only that, to legitimize the cannabis and the information side. And I think the only way to start taking people off the opiates and talking to other healthcare professionals is you have to work in combination with those two. Like, not cannabis, there's a lot of research out there. Us being as retailers have to know about this. It's not you have a client coming to you and saying, well, you take this, when you really don't know. The answer is to give them the right answers. And if the only way we can give them the right answers is we're working within those parameters to be in contact with healthcare professionals at all times. Like, I'm not a healthcare, but I don't know, I lost a daughter because of opiates. And it's something that I know now, and then talking to like the kids in that, like their next generation and people with opiates and healthcare professionals, and they're all telling me the same thing. You do realize just by having these stores open that you're saying to these guys, and I don't know if these guys were understanding of it, but an opiate itself is like, it's a speed. It picks you up. It keeps you going. Versus marijuana is a depressant. So now, without knowing in between that cause and effect, and not having healthcare providers that you can talk to, you leave clients and people who do not know at the risk of other people decisions that they don't know. And I applaud this counselor over here asking about that, dealing about an opiate, and would you prescribe this? Well, I would prescribe it if I knew 100% what I was telling. If I did not know, and that's where I think the 10 versus having 20, it's the actual knowledge base that's out there, and for our community to gain off of that knowledge base. There's probably, honestly, in this town, and that's maybe, I'm just throwing a number out there, there's maybe 15 tops that are qualified in this town that you could ask them the difference, like myself, between a cannabinoid, an endocannabinoid, and going in from there, and what's the effects of it. I agree in over-regulating it. It sounds crazy in the hours of 10 to 10. I think they should be there to coincide with other healthcare professionals that if we need help with too. And it's different when you're dealing with people with opiates, because now I'm also having to take naloxone courses because you know, it's a shame, but that people are addicted to it, and what can we do to help take them off of there? And it's that stigma to promote getting them off of there. And I agree with these guys that they're not all those sort of individuals are going to talk to your regular healthcare. But at least if they can come in and we, on an educated decision, can help them in the right way. Our decision on opening up a business wasn't to make everybody high. Our whole thing was to help people medically.
Okay. Thanks.
But I agree 100% with what you guys are doing. And I thank you very much. But I still say the only 10 licenses, one per thing.
One per. Okay. Thanks
Awesome.
very much.
Thank you for the time, guys.
Hold on for half a second, just in case there are any questions. Are there any questions for the delegation? We'd just like to make sure that nobody runs away. And it looks like there weren't this time around. Thanks very much, Mr. Skopex.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So, right to left. I'm on my left side here. I've got right here. Sure. Welcome. If you'll just introduce yourself for the record and for council, and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm Les Hagan. I'm the Executive Director of Action on Smoking and Health in Edmonton. And ASH is Western Canada's leading tobacco control organization. We're a registered health charity, and we've been working here in Alberta for over 40 years to help municipalities with the leading avoidable cause of premature death in Canada. We've got some concerns with the proposed bylaw with respect to public consumption, and particularly its isolated restrictions on cannabis consumption. We're also very concerned about tobacco regulation taking a backseat to cannabis legislation or regulation, especially considering the enormous public health impact of tobacco use. Tobacco is responsible for 45 times more deaths than cannabis, according to available estimates. And any public restrictions on cannabis use can be easily justified for tobacco use, especially if the main objective here is to protect children and youth from harmful substances. Public smoking bans have evolved over several decades, and they represent an enormous public health achievement. Smoking bans have become a cornerstone of the successful effort to reduce tobacco use and to keep children and youth tobacco-free. Cannabis legalization has the potential to renormalize public smoking and to reverse or impair the gains that have been made in reducing tobacco use. It's also important to know that Grande Prairie has been a leader on the issue of smoking regulations, and before the provincial government banned smoking in workplaces and public establishments, Grande Prairie was in front of that issue. For these reasons, we are discouraged to observe that the bylaw 1278 does not align public restrictions on the smoking and vaping of cannabis with those on tobacco. From a public health perspective, it is impossible to justify more restrictions on cannabis consumption than tobacco. The proposed bylaw represents a lost opportunity to expand the public health impact of the bylaw by placing parallel restrictions on tobacco, smoking, and vaping. And the bylaw also, as drafted, also overlooks the issue of smoking shisha or water pipes. Water pipes or hookahs also model smoking behavior, and they emit secondhand smoke. Water pipe smoking has become increasingly popular among youth, and it is overtaking spit tobacco as the second most popular form of tobacco use here in Alberta. And we encourage council to close this loophole as well before hookah bars become a fixture in Grande Prairie, especially when cannabis is legalized. Now, to a 5-year-old, smoking is smoking, whether it involves cannabis or tobacco or vaping or water pipes. It's really all the same thing from a modeling perspective. And vaping produces visible emissions that closely emulate smoking. We know that modeling is an important aspect of childhood development, and if we're modeling healthy behaviors to young people, we're more likely to get healthy kids. So we believe that public smoking and vaping and any increase in that will model increased smoking behavior to youth, and that poses a significant health problem. Now, we've proposed a number of recommendations and really simple amendments to the bylaw that's in front of you that would expand its impact and would allow us to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And one bird, from a public health perspective, is a sparrow, and the other bird is an albatross, and it's called tobacco. And there's no need to kill the sparrow and to spare the albatross. We can do both. And I'm going to challenge Grande Prairie Council to do that. And here are the recommendations. Align the smoking vaping restrictions as proposed between cannabis and tobacco by amending section 3.1 to read, no person shall smoke or vape any substance. That'll also allow you to deal with hookah smoking. Number 2, amend the definition of smoke to read, smoke means to smoke, hold, or otherwise have control over a lit smoking product or use an electronic cigarette. Now that's smoking product versus tobacco product. And then the next amendment would be simply to replace the definition of tobacco product with the definition for smoking product, to be worded as follows. Smoking product means any product or substance that is ignited or heated for the purpose of inhaling. And the wording goes on from there. So I've provided this in writing. Appreciate very much the opportunity to speak to council and happy to take your questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Hagan. And I understand you came from Edmonton specifically to make this presentation this evening, so appreciate your commitment to do that. Are there any questions for the delegation? So just to clarify, this is specifically to item 7.3 on our agenda, bylaw C 1278B, if I've got that correct. And Mr. Hagan, to be clear, you're not asking for any additional restrictions on public smoking at this point. Your recommendations are just to align the restrictions on cannabis-related products.
Oh, yeah, we're very pleased with what we're seeing with respect to cannabis. And the 2 big items we're looking for are restrictions in parks and public recreation spaces, because that's where kids go and where we're expected to model healthy, active behavior to youth. And then secondly, public events, because of the number of people who gather and cluster. So those are the 2 main items that where we are seeking alignment on tobacco and cannabis use.
Okay. I see Councillor Bressy's in the queue. Oops, sorry, and I double hit the button, so Councillor.
Got it figured out.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for coming all the way to speak to us. I read, you emailed us this presentation as well, and I was reading it, and I've been considering making motions with your recommendations, but help me get over my final hump. And it makes sense, but we haven't told the community that we're discussing any further restrictions on smoking, and I'm concerned that we're not that if we made this motion today, we'd be not taking any public input into account. So help me potentially get over that last final hump.
Well, fortunately, due to the slowdown in Ottawa, there's some time here. So if this takes another few weeks, I don't think that's a big deal. You've got one opportunity to get it right the first time, and I'd encourage you to do that.
Thank you.
Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Mr. Hagan, do you see any way around or any answer to folks who are at a public event that, may have a beer gardens over there, and would perhaps like to smoke? Is there any exception or any reasonable way to accommodate that, say, at a folk festival?
Yes,
or some other kind of
designated
venue.
smoking and vaping areas. And what we would recommend is something that's at least 50 meters away from a crowd or a high traffic area, is closed in so as not to be visible to youth and children and youth, and limited in number. Like, you don't need 20 of these at a public event, maybe 1 or 2.
So you have your beer garden and your wheat garden.
Well, we don't want to frame it quite like that. With a beer garden, it's often a part of the seating, right, for an event. And I don't think that's necessary here. People can come and go and use a smoking vaping area as needed. They don't need to spend hours in there.
Yeah.
And we don't need that happening right next to the crowd full of kids.
Fantastic.
I think most cannabis users would agree.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't see anybody else in the queue. Thanks again for being here this evening to make the presentation. Thank you. Okay, we're all the way over to the left-hand side. I see a couple others. I'll start with the lady in the back, I guess. Yeah. Welcome. And you've seen the routine. We'll ask you to just sort of introduce yourself, and don't worry, we don't bite. Welcome.
This is the first for me. I'm here to represent the kids. I'm a grandparent. And I think this is absolutely terrible.
Ma'am, I just want to interrupt to make sure that we get your name.
Sorry, it's Pat Stevenson.
Sure. Thanks, Pat.
Each one of these delegates have said that they've all said that this is like liquor. And yet we're letting people smoke dope 30 meters from a park. Did you go to the park with a beer today with your kids? I don't think that's legal. And yet we're saying that this cannabis is the same as alcohol, and yet we're allowing it to be smoked at a playground. Right now, I have a bunch of people smoking dope behind me. I smell it. I smell it inside my house. So that means that I cannot go outside because I don't want it. What's that doing to my grandkids that are playing out in the backyard? What's that doing that to my dog? Your animals? Like, we really need to think this through. Like, this smoke goes everywhere. You smell it everywhere. It's affecting you when you're outside. When you're having a beer, that's not affecting your neighbor unless you get behind that car. But you can sit on your deck and have a beer without affecting me, without it affecting each one of you. And yet we're saying that it's okay to go smoke in the backyard. We're saying it's okay to go smoke by the playground. Like, really, guys, you're here to protect your kids. I think you need to do that. 30 meters from a park, that's ridiculous. You each have kids, you each have grandkids. Is that what you want for them? Really? I don't think so. And I really think you need to amend that. I don't want to walk down the street of Grande Prairie and smell dope. I don't. And I don't want my grandkids to do. Like, put it in your house. It's legal. Smoke it in your house where it's not affecting me. It's not affecting my kids. You all want to have stores everywhere. That's fine. We have liquor stores everywhere. But we don't get to go running around with our liquor. So keep it in your house. Keep it away from me. I spend from 5 o'clock at night until midnight in my backyard after work. And by 7 o'clock, the smell from dope already is so strong that I can't be outside. So what's going to happen on July 1st when this is all legal? I'm never going to get to go outside. My kids aren't going to get to go outside. My grandkids aren't going to get to go outside. Like, to me, I really think if you guys are here for the people of Grande Prairie, you need to be here for those kids. You need to be here for the rest of us. Not just for the ones who want to have legalized pot. We had legalized alcohol too. And it doesn't affect me on my deck. So, sorry.
Thanks very much for the presentation. Are there any questions for the delegation? I don't see anybody. Oh, Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your impassioned speech there, Ms. Stevenson. I just want to ask you a question. So you're appealing to council for absolute prohibition of cannabis smoking in public?
That's what I would like to see, yes.
Okay.
I don't want to see it in the playground. I don't want to see a parent sitting over there watching their kids 30 meters away smoking dope. It's a mind-altering drug. Like, treat it that way. It's not a cigarette. It's just like alcohol, except it's affecting each and every one of us because we're smelling it. We're inhaling it.
Okay.
Yes, that's what I would.
All right, thank you very
I
much.
understand that there is a bunch of people on Facebook that feel the same way. I think we need to talk to the people of Grande Prairie to see what they want, because I don't think this is what they want.
So if this were to go, well, this is going to go through with the federal government, the provincial government. It's going to be in our community. We can have a prohibition on it, I guess, in public places. But it's still not going to stop people from smoking it or trying to access it in some way, shape, or form, because people in our community are already doing it, as you've attested to with the smoke coming in your backyard. So if we allow it and we allow the sale of it and we prohibit it to someone's house, or apartment, what of the people who live in apartments that can't smoke inside their apartment because there's smoking restrictions there? They're still going to be forced to go outside or into their car, and then that means we have more impaired drivers on the streets. How do we deal with that?
I would think that there's a reason why there is no smoking in the apartment. So obviously, the apartment owner has already stated that this is not good for the rest of the residents. So go smoke it in your car. Doesn't mean they're going to get in and drive. They're smoking it in their car. Why should I have to smell it? Why should I have to deal with it when I don't want it? Why should my kids have to deal with it? I don't think it's right.
Well, those are legitimate concerns. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I'll do one last time. I did it before and it was wrong, but I don't see anybody else in the queue, Council. No, not this time. Thanks very much, Ms. Stevenson, for being here. Thank you. I think we had one more delegation over this way. Yeah, yes, sir. You've seen the routine. If you'll introduce yourself for the record and for council, and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Dr. Alberta Willis. I'm with Alberta Health Services. And I did share with Council in February some information, and then with the meeting on the 22nd again. But unfortunately, I couldn't make it to that meeting, so I thought I'll come to this meeting. So I just want to address a few points. It was actually nice to go at the end because you could hear all the other arguments. The one was in your package before, and for those in the audience, you can just see the little smile.
If you lay it down on the plastic piece there, and you'll have to rotate it to make sure we get it the right way. And there you go. Yeah.
There you go. Wonderful. Now everybody can see it. So this is kind of what we talk about as the public health approach. So on the left-hand side, on the red, you'll see this is where we are currently with cannabis as we sit today. So it's illegal. It's a black market. It leads to all the other things we've talked about, everybody's mentioned before, gangsterism and everything else. If you go to the far other side, to the blue side, this is where we are currently with tobacco and alcohol. It's legalized with very few restrictions, basically. So if you look to the left, it says health and social problems. And this is research has shown, if you just let stuff go, this is what's going to happen. We're going to have lots of health and social problems because nobody can deny that we're having impaired driving, and like Mr. Hagen said, we're having people die from cancer and from all kinds of other effects of tobacco. So where we want to end up, and honestly, if I was much older and I could go back to the 60s and 70s when we started working on tobacco and alcohol legislation, if we did it right back then, I'm sure we wouldn't have had lots of these problems we've got now. So this is our chance to actually do it right this time. So have a market regulation, and whether it's 10 or 11 or 12, I mean, I agree with you, there should be a limit, and that's the one thing we're definitely advocating for. We're also advocating for the setbacks, making sure it's not close to anything else very important, like our kids. Just want to address one point. People talk about safe cannabis. I think it's the same as talking about safe tobacco. I understand where it's coming from, that some of the illegal cannabis is cut in with other drugs, and that's not a good thing. But cannabis isn't safe per se, because there's still some bad things that can happen. I mean, just some examples for those that do not know. Up to the age of 25, your brain is still developing. So if you use cannabis before then, it can cause long-term cognitive development issues. Nothing that you burn is good to put into your lungs. They say actually second-hand cannabis smoke is as bad or worse than second-hand tobacco smoke. Mental health related, I mean, if you do use cannabis when you're young and use it frequently, it can actually increase the risk of mental health problems like depression, anxiety, and psychosis. And if you use it early and young, it is also associated with higher risk of dependency. So although we talk about safe cannabis, we've just got to remember there are still some side effects, and there are still some negative health effects to cannabis as well. Just on the number and on the hours, and that'll be my final point, is research have proven, so the higher, I'll maybe put this thing up so that you can see it. I like this. This is like the old school transparency thing that my parents used to do at school.
Except that we can zoom in when something's hard to read. Look at that.
See, there you go. Wow.
There we go. There we go.
This is fancy. So there is a reference at the bottom for those that actually want to go look it up. But they have found through research that where there's higher density and number of stores, it leads to greater access, which leads to higher rates of use, which leads to higher social and health problems. And the same go for hours as well. I've got the same slide for the hours. So the more it's available, the more people are going to use it, and the more social and health problems there's going to be from our point of view. And talking about money, we know we all want to save money, and healthcare is using about half the money in the budget currently. So if whatever we can do to cut back, I think will be good. And that's it.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions for Dr. de Villers? Any questions for the delegation? I don't see anybody ringing in. Thank you very much, Dr. de Villers, for being here this evening. Appreciate it. And I think I saw one additional hand, and I will ask you to come forward and make a presentation. If you can introduce yourself. And at this point in the evening, I'll ask you to, if as best you can, if you have some new information to add or a new perspective, please do that, and we'll try to ensure that we move on to where council actually gets to be able to make some decisions on these items.
Perfect. So my name is Sharif Ali. I'm a self-starting entrepreneur in Grand Prairie here. My business is an online vape store called Inhale Vaping. And I'm working with quite a few, I myself am a medical patient, and I'm working with a couple other medical patients. And we're looking at potentially starting a club to bring awareness. I used to be a reformed joint smoker, and with the smoking of joints, you do get a lot of smoke, and I have had that issue with neighbors. I myself am a mother. So I would definitely love to be able to work with the city and kind of do a piece on vaping. It's changed my life dramatically. It's reduced combustion, so for my health it's better. And also for my neighborhood and my community, I don't have the smoke, the vapors don't linger. It's something that I am very passionate about, and I would love to see us having a center where people could come for information, teach them how to vape and promote, like we all want healthiness in the community. I myself have been working on this business for about 4 months, and I've had a lot of issues. I've called the city myself trying to find information and get involved, and I see a lot of people here are. So for community outreach, I think we could do definitely a better job, and I would love to spearhead and kind of work with it. Maybe if we can set somebody aside so we can help with Grand Prairie and educate people that make them feel comfortable, like mothers and grandparents as well. And let's keep the smell from lingering in areas and keep it fresh and clean in Grand Prairie, like I know this city is. Yeah.
Thanks very much for the presentation, concise and to the point. Any questions for the delegation? Don't see anybody ringing in or raising their hands. Once, going twice. Okay, thanks very much for being here, Sharif. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I think we managed to make it through all of the hands. And so if there wasn't anybody else that wished to present to council, then we will close the delegation portion of our meeting. We'll move on. We have no public hearings this evening, and so we'll move into our unfinished business, starting with bylaw C-1260-94 with some amendments to the land use bylaw. And I'm going to recognize Councillor Minhas is going to declare a conflict of interest, and we'll leave the council chambers. And we will move on to second reading. So can I get a motion for second reading of bylaw C-1260-94? Can I get a motion for second reading? Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'd make a recommendation that council give second reading to bylaw C-1260-94 being an amendment to land use bylaw.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Plott. So open for discussion, debate, and I wonder if there were some amendments to this proposed by council at the last meeting. Mr. Johnson, do you want to sort of highlight to council what the current status is of how you managed to sort of incorporate the amendments proposed by council at the last meeting, or moved by council at the last meeting?
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'll speak specifically to the land use bylaw amendments only. There was an approved motion which removed the proposed setback from liquor stores of 10 meters. That was passed. There was the motion to remove the overlay map. It added cannabis retail to the commercial transition and local commercial land use districts. And there was a motion that changed the development authority from the development officer to the Infrastructure and Protective Services Committee. So in the interim, administration has updated all of those bylaws to reflect those motions.
Okay, thanks very much. So council, that's the bylaw as it stands at second reading. And so we can have discussion and debate on second reading. We can have amendments at this point, yeah, so open for discussion and debate at this stage. Is there any discussion or debate on the land use bylaw? Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mayor Given. You know, I've given all of this a lot of thought over the last several months. Once we started to get the news that this legislation would inevitably pass federally and hand us all of these challenges, I started to play the game. I mean, it was my intention to try to do all of the things that we could to pass the right kind of bylaws and associated regulations that would make this as palatable as could be in our city. And I thought that the Form and Fold team that made presentations did a very good job in putting together a good set of recommendations. I was rather disappointed at the number of things that we as a council chose to propose changing since then. And having a look at overall the things that I've heard in the last meeting and in this meeting, I'm more reluctant to play the game anymore. As far as I can see, first of all, we're trying to be careful about where consumption is allowed. However, what we are doing is, for the most part, we're allowing consumption of an intoxicant on our streets and just about everywhere in public other than a few specific areas. I think that leads to normalization for young people because it's a distinctive enough smell that young people know what's being consumed. And it's not going to take more than a generation for kids to start to understand that, hey, that smell, it's legal, it's allowed, and I can do it anywhere. And oh, it's an intoxicant too, maybe I can have some fun with this. I think we're headed in the wrong direction as a country, and I know that we can't change that here. But I'm not at all supportive of the process in the long run, and I'm going to be voting against all of our bylaws tonight.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Blackburn, and thanks for that explanation. Any other discussion or debate? I'll say that I'm open to the majority of the amendments that were made last time. I still have a significant objection to the inclusion of cannabis retail and local commercial. That's still a very big concern for me. The fact that it is discretionary and that it will land at the committee where council will be able to see it and make some determination about whether there's any benefit from any individual application means that there's still a significant amount of business risk in the proposal, as there is with every business that is a discretionary use anywhere in the city. There is the potential that committee acting as development authority could choose not to approve a discretionary use at any point. And so there is some risk to being an entrepreneur, to starting a business, and that risk is inherent in any number of different types of businesses across the city. I will say that there'd have to be pretty substantive other benefit to the community for me to vote in support of any cannabis retail in a local commercial, but I appreciate that that's a discussion that I'd get to have at the committee meeting if and when those come forward. So generally I'm supportive of the land use bylaw changes other than local commercial, and I'll exercise my right to vote against cannabis retail and local commercial locations when it comes forward to committee and using that discretion. Is there any other discussion or debate? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Before I get to my point, I just want to comment on that and just share that I could be wrong, but I believe it was my motion that led to this getting to local commercial, and I share a pretty similar view with local commercial, where I think that it is something that I hope the committee takes a very close and precise examination of and a careful examination of when individual applications come up. I wasn't ready to write it off in all local commercial areas, but I think that we do need to be I hope that the committee, as somebody who can't vote on it, I hope the committee is selective of those, so I will echo that. I am comfortable with the discretionary use in all these land use districts. I'm still struggling with development authority, and before I get to potentially making motions, I'm just curious, a question for administration. My understanding is when something is a discretionary use and somebody applies for a permit, there's a public notification period where the public's allowed to chip in. Is there any difference in the public notification and the public input between a development officer approving something and the Infrastructure Protective Services Committee approving?
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor Given. As far as process with public notification, there is no difference who the development authority is. The process is the same. Letters to adjacents advertised in the newspaper and notice of decision afterwards.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm still struggling with in our central commercial, our general commercial, and arterial commercial districts. I'm still not convinced that the IPS committee is the appropriate approving authority for that. The reason for that is I think there's some no-brainer areas where retail stores should be allowed and where I don't get the point of delaying it by 3 weeks, of taking hours of staff time to deliver it to the IPS committee, especially since I've got really good confidence in administration to bring any questionable locations to the IPS committee's attention if they need to. That being said, I made my case, I felt pretty strongly last meeting, and I don't think I've got any new arguments to make, so I'm not going to make an motion just for the sake of making a motion, but if anybody on council and reflection has changed their mind, I'd probably I would vote in favor of that motion. A motion I do want to make is we've got right now, this is discretionary use development officer in industrial areas, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I know for me, I didn't really realize that was the implication of some of the amendments we made. We specifically talked about commercial zones. We never talked about industrial businesses, and so we never had a specific discussion about those. I've been going back and forth on if I can support these in industrial areas, and my concern is, I think one of the biggest cautions that the public has brought to me is impairment in the workplace. And I don't know if it's always appropriate to have some of these near some of our industrial facilities. So I was going back and forth on, can I support these industrial areas, can I not? I think I can, but I do think that that's something I want to give council more oversight to. So that being said, even though I think we should take some of our development authority away from the IPS committee and give it to staff, here's one where I'm going to make the opposite motion, and I'm going to move that we change the approving authority for industrial business and general industrial districts to the Infrastructure and Protective Services Committee.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. And so just to clarify, that's on all cannabis-related uses or on cannabis retail?
Sorry, just on cannabis retail stores.
Okay. So that motion is clear. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion? Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I will not be supporting that motion. I actually think in the industrial areas, the retail sale of cannabis isn't going to be an issue. If Buddy's going to have it at work, he's going to pick it up anywhere on his way to work anyway. And the fact that it's a little closer to his business, I mean, he passes a couple of stores potentially on his way driving from home to the business. I don't think that's going to matter. And I think in terms of retail sale, in particular industrial business has some pretty ideal locations. So I would not support that motion.
Thanks, Councillor Friesen. Any other discussion or debate? I will be supporting the motion on the basis that I think our industrial areas should be intended for industrial uses rather than retail uses. We have retail and commercial districts for a reason, and the more that we allow retail type businesses to locate in industrial areas, we rob that activity, I guess, from more appropriate commercial retail spaces. And so it's really not so much about the availability question, but I will, for me, I'll support the motion on the basis of trying to keep industrial for industrial manufacturing uses. And we heard that there are legitimate cannabis related ones, which I would support. But yeah, so I will be supporting the amendment on that basis of trying to keep retail uses in a retail setting as much as possible. Councillor Thiessen?
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I'm really just cued into the conversation here, just to state to council and to the members watching in the gallery and at home, as I wasn't at the first public hearing for pertaining to the land use bylaw on the use of cannabis and the laws that govern the Municipal Government Act. My vote will not be counted, so hence I will not be voting at all on this one. But good luck to your amendment, and I can't wait to see how it plays out.
And actually, yeah, to be clear, so not that your vote won't be counted, you're not allowed to vote by the Municipal Government Act. Yeah. So it's not that we're ignoring Councillor Thiessen, it's that he's actually not allowed to vote. So we'll. I don't see anybody else in the queue. Anybody else in the queue with respect to Councillor Bressy's motion, which would have the effect of seeing cannabis retail uses as a discretionary use to be forwarded to the Infrastructure and Protective Services Committee for industrial districts. Everybody's clear on that? Then I will call for the vote. Please vote in. Okay, just have to make sure that I've got my numbers right. Yeah, okay. And that motion does not pass in council when we have a tied vote. The vote is lost because there's not a majority of support. So Councillor Bressy's motion does not carry. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Now, I would actually like to make a motion. I'm with Councillor Bressy on trying to have our development officer manage as much as is reasonable for them to do so. And I would like to move that the authority for approval in central commercial, general commercial, and arterial commercial be under the authority of development officer.
Okay. So that motion is clear, changing the development authority away from the Infrastructure and Protective Services Committee and directing that to administration in the form of the development officer. And I think that motion is pretty straightforward. Any discussion or debate on the motion? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry. Okay. Then if there are no other amendments, then we're back to second reading as amended. Are there any other amendments? Seeing none, then we'll call for a vote on Councillor Palat's motion for second reading as amended by Councillor Friesen. Please vote. Thank you. And that motion carries 5-1. And so we move on to third reading. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I would make a recommendation that council give third reading to bylaw C 1260-94 being an amendment to the land use bylaw.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Palat. So this is a motion for third reading. Of course, would contain the amendment that was just passed. Any discussion or debate on third reading? And seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. And that motion carries. That'll allow us to move on to item 7.2, bylaw C 1064H, an amendment to the business license bylaw. Can I get a motion for second reading? A motion for second reading of that business license bylaw? Councillor Platt.
Didn't realize we're all jumping up for that one. I'd make a motion that we give second reading to bylaw C 1064H, being an amendment to the business license bylaw.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Platt. I would look to management to give us an overview of the changes from last time and where it stands, just so that council's all on the same understanding. Mr. Manuel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the highlights from the amendments made at the last council meeting include reduction in store hours to 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Sunday, with stores closed on Christmas Day and other times as endorsed on a license if required. Additionally, there was the reduction of the proposed retail store fee from $5,000 to $2,500, and a license cap of 10 business licenses within the first year, and a maximum of 2 licenses issued per separate business entity. Those are the highlights.
Thanks very much, Mr. Manuel. So that's what is under consideration for second reading, as moved by Councillor Palat. Open for discussion debate. Councillor Palat, do you want to speak to it?
Thanks, Mayor Given. I just have a question for administration, and it's more just if we did leave the cap at 10, if you could maybe just give me an explanation of how the lottery or how the system would work, of how we determine those.
Mr. Manuel?
Yes, certainly. So what administration has proposed so far is we've actually prepared correspondence and sent it out to prospective retailers. And the approach that we've taken at this point is we wanted to prevent a free-for-all lottery where, frankly, anybody just applies without any pre-qualification. So what we've done is created a process which requires 3 things to be submitted in order to be qualified to enter the lottery. Those 3 things include a simple business licensing application form that's standard for the City of Grande Prairie. Additionally, an cannabis retail store applicant disclosure form, which is a modified, more condensed version of an existing AGLC form. So anybody that's applied with the AGLC will have already submitted that information. And it's anybody that hasn't applied with the AGLC will be required to submit that information. So it's a bit of a parallel field there. And then the other piece is a proposed development permit application, which is location-based and essentially requires the applicant to have the right, not necessarily a lease, but at least a right to occupy that premise if they're successful. So you really have to have some work into it in order to get qualified into the lottery. And then subsequently, we plan on, if things pass tonight, there'll be a 2-week, 3-week intake period. Yeah, it's 3-week intake period, at which time it will close. We'll make sure that the applicants that have been submitted are qualified. And then on July 9th, they will be entered into the lottery, which will identify ranking as far as processing licenses. So, for instance, as they're drawn, we will draw all applicants to identify not just the top 10, but if there's 30, we'll draw 30, and that will give us a rank in order as applicants may fall off or not proceed or are unsuccessful in obtaining process. We go to that list. So that was the intent with the process so far, and that's it.
Thanks, Mr. Randall. Councillor Platt?
I guess my question or my thought is more about how do we make sure that if there was only 10 stores, that they're scattered around town, and that we don't have seven applicants pop up in the west corner of Grande Prairie and all 7 of them get the successful lottery, and we have 3 on the east side and 0 of them get it. Like, just so I think a lot of the discussion was making sure that we want to, if it's going to be legalized and it's going to be in the community, that it's actually in the community. I'm just concerned that if we don't have a system that kind of protects certain areas of town and says, if there's 3 in this area and this area was fine with 3, that they're maybe not part of the lottery system, just so that we get back to where that it's access, I guess, if we're going to try to decriminalize this.
Mr. Randall?
So that is a consideration that we took. So there's really 2 points there. So we saw the 1 point was worry about concentration. And we believe that the existing requirements within the land use bylaw dealing with the concentration, for instance, only 3 stores within a 360-meter radius, and some of the stuff we have downtown related to 180 meters on the same side of the street, that sort of stuff, will certainly prevent the clustering from occurring. That being said, as part of the lottery, if an applicant, for instance, had one of our applicants has at least 5 applications potentially for different stores. Now, as part of the lottery, they would only have 2 entries because that's the maximum number of stores that somebody can submit right now. But as their number 1, for instance, or number 2 entry is selected, what we are allowing successful applicants to do is change their locations if so, for instance, if you're store number 1 and you have 3 other locations, you can potentially adjust your location based off of, obviously you'd still have to have the right to occupy this new location and whatnot. But I think as you see lottery entries drawn, you'll see businesses probably adjusting their locations based on market demand. I think it would make some sense for them to, if the east side of Grand Prairie is completely empty of stores, somebody would probably be inclined to look for that opportunity if there wasn't an applicant that's going to be in that spot. The other consideration we had is, frankly, there's commercial areas within the city that are more concentrated in other. I'll give an example. There's a reason why there's not a lot of grocery stores on the east end of Grand Prairie, because the available commercial space simply just does not exist. So to expect that the same number of stores are going to automatically arrive in those locations when there's no space to support them is probably wishful.
And my other question, thanks for the answer on that, Mr. Manuel. My other question was just a lot of the people that come up today talked about, increasing hours would maybe have an effect on impaired driving. Is there any data or stats on that we could, I guess, just for?
So honestly, it'd be anecdotal at best right now. I certainly, this is going to be a bit of a social experiment in Canada over the next number of months, and I guess we're going to have to see how it plays out. With alcohol, I have some information, but we've been very keen on saying that cannabis is not alcohol, so I don't really want to make that correlation.
Okay, thank you.
Just for those that heard the beep, Councillor Clayton is out of the city right now at an event representing council. She had expressed a desire, actually through our policy, to dial in for these items. She was able. We do have that set up, and so she says that she has been trying just now to dial in. So I'm just going to check and see. Councillor Clayton, are you there? Okay. So she should be able to dial in. Because the line, I believe, is open, and we'll just confirm that. But when Councillor Clayton is able to dial in, she'll be able to vote on the items. Well, maybe we're dialing her now. But I'll recognize Councillor Friesen. We're discussing second reading of Bylaw C-1064, amendment to the business license bylaw. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I have to remember it was so long ago I pushed that button. I'm not at all wild about the idea of 10 business licenses for the reasons presented by many of our hopeful retailers here tonight, but also because I really don't think that it is our place. And, I appreciate that this is a bit of a social experiment to begin with, but I'm just not crazy about limiting a market, a fair market, out of the gate. I would like to see it removed altogether. I don't think that we will need a cap on licenses. However, I don't think that that's going to fly with my colleagues. So I am going to propose an amendment that Grande Prairie issues 20 business licenses for cannabis retail within the first year, a maximum of 2 licenses issued per separate business entity.
So that motion is obviously in order. So the motion is to increase the number of available business licenses in the first year from 10 to 20. And that amendment is open for discussion and debate. Okay, and Councillor Clayton, are you there now?
I am, Mayor Given, and when appropriate, I had comments on the amendment.
Okay, and so Councillor Clayton, you were followed along where we're at, business license bylaw. Councillor Friesen just moved the from 10 licenses to 20. And if that's what you're on, then I'll go to you first, since it's a little bit more difficult to see you.
Great, thanks, Mayor Given. I would strongly encourage Council to defeat this motion. I echo Councillor Friesen's comments in regards to the free market opportunities. I believe that there is an opportunity here, and by limiting the number of licenses, we're not having a true look at what the opportunities are. It's not government's place, in my opinion, to dictate the success and failure of business. Rather, it's government's role to provide opportunities. In my opinion, I would encourage Council to not support this motion, and then in turn, I would be prepared to make a follow-up motion that we don't limit the number of licenses. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. We will move on to Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. If Councillor Clayton beats me to making the motion that we eliminate the retail cap, I will definitely be supporting that motion. I really hope it passes. That being said, I will also be supporting this motion because if that motion is defeated, I'd rather see us have 20 licenses than 10. So I'm still adamantly opposed to having a cap at all, but I will be voting to increase that cap.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'm just a little bit confused about the procedural process here because it was during debate of this same bylaw when we were dealing with it at the last meeting, which was also a debate on second reading, that a motion was passed to put a cap on. Is it appropriate for a second motion to reverse that to happen in the same debate?
Well, this is not the same debate, obviously. Appreciating second reading from last time. This motion could have happened at third reading, so in terms of semantics, the motion could be held off on second reading, could be made subsequently at third reading, and Council has latitude to make amendments all the way up to third reading. So,
thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion or debate? Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I've had a lot of chance, like probably all of us, to mull this over the last month here since we've had a little bit of a stall. And I'm as a business owner, I never want to stop industry either. I'm not comfortable with unlimited though. I have to say that I wouldn't be able to support that. Even 20 is a bit of a stretch for me, more just because I don't know if I think this community can support 20 stores. I mean, much against the conversation. I've talked to several companies that are looking at putting stores out there. I'm not convinced that we're big enough to support 20. I would support the 20 though, and I guess I would caution industry that maybe 20 isn't available, but I don't think unlimited is going to work. So I would support the motion, but I wouldn't support unlimited.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Platt. I'll enter the debate to say that I won't support the amendment. I continue to believe that a cautious approach is appropriate here. This is an opportunity for us to build a strong and robust market that works well for retailers by ensuring that there isn't a gold rush mentality where although operators will meet the qualifications where they get into business and find that there's not enough money to be made in the business. And that would be unfortunate, and I think that's something that we can avoid. And I would actually debate whether or not it's government's role to provide, regulation. It is actually government. That is exactly the role of government, to get into regulating markets where there is a potential impact on public health and public safety. And we do have a role to play in that. We can choose to be involved in that or not. But I think that this approach provides ample opportunity while still ensuring that we have an opportunity to ensure that this works out in the best way possible for our community, recognizing that the decision has been made at the federal level. This will become legalized. The graphic presented by one of the delegations sort of recognizing a bit of a pendulum there, of saying, on the one end, if you don't legalize a substance or a product, the illicit market takes over and tries to make as much money as it can in an completely unregulated illicit market. If you swing too far and have a completely unregulated legal market, the corporate sector tries to make as much money as they can. And in both instances, the impacts to the public are somewhat similar. They may be different, but in the end, the public health and social challenges can be very, very similar. It's just that corporations are making the money rather than criminal organizations. An appropriately balanced market is what we should be striving for, where there's a reasonable access and where we take away the negative effects of the illicit market. And we need to try to find that balance. And I think saying a completely open market is saying we're not worried about finding the balance. The market will find the balance. And I think that we do have a role to play. Otherwise, we don't need elected officials of any stripe to make any decision. We could just let companies run it. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. It is with great joy that I get to participate in this vote, as I am not regulated under business licensing bylaws. I'm going to kind of echo what Mayor Given has said. I, too, am looking at this as taking a cautious approach, and largely in respect to our business owners. I know this is a big opportunity for each and every one of you who have come forward to speak to try to cash in on this market. But as I become ever more aware of the different avenues that one can obtain cannabis in today's society and culture, I do think it is a fashionable risk and a great risk that each and every business owner is going to try to take. I'm not in favor of the 20, not because I don't think that the city of Grande Prairie can't support it, but I was actually waiting to hear what the council, who was already engaged in this type of debate at the last council meeting, had to say and what kind of amendments were coming forward. I would be more in line with limiting it to, as recommended, 10, but instead of having 2 licenses given to one business owner, I would strike that down to 1 would be my preferred amendment. And that reason being is that at least then we have 10 business owners instead of 5 business owners potentially, who will each have a chance to cut into this market and make their mark in this market. And there is where the free market is really valuable and successful. Otherwise, we are only creating free market monopolies for those who, you know, can cut, copy, and paste and have the funds to purchase 2 successful cannabis licensed retail businesses. So I want to maximize the number of successful applicants, minimize the free market monopolies while taking a cautious approach. So if I beat someone to the queue and this doesn't pass, or if it does pass, then I guess it's all moot. Yeah, that's sort of where I sit. More business owners, less monopolies, and then I think we truly have a freer market. So that's where my vote will be.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I think this was Councillor Friesen's motion. I don't see anybody else in the queue. And so I'll look to Councillor Friesen to close.
Thank you. I don't know, Councillor Clayton, whether we would get our unlimited or not, so I am going to vote in favor of this. I would not support anything that causes us to go to a lottery. I think that that's a really poor way of selecting who is going to be running this kind of a business in the community. So I would encourage council to vote for this increased number of licenses with the limit of 2. I think it's a happy medium between what we've been asked for here tonight, what some of us as councillors want, and what others want. I think it's a pretty happy medium. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Friesen. So I will call for the vote. Councillor Clayton, I'll ask for your vote after I've asked the other council members to vote. And so you'll have to give us a in favor or opposed, and I'll ask for that in just a second. I will ask our council members that are here in attendance to register their vote on the amendment to increase the number of licenses available in the first year from 10 to 20. Please vote on that amendment. I think I've got all my council members in the room voting on that. Councillor Clayton, what's your vote?
In favor.
In favor, okay, so add 1. And that motion is defeated on a tie of 4 to 4. 3 votes in the room plus Councillor Clayton in favor of the increase to 20 and 4 opposed. Are there any follow-up motions? Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, I'd like to take care of a couple things here. First, as I already stated, I would like to amend the motion to strike the number of allowed licenses to a maximum of 1. So essentially, we could probably strike that all out as far as that portion of the business license.
No, sorry. So just to clarify, your intent is that there should be no more than the maximum number of licenses be 1 per
business owner. Yeah.
I think we need to specify that so that it isn't that. Yeah, I think that does need to be included in there. Otherwise, management would interpret it to be as many as a business entity wanted to apply for.
Okay, then let me give it a go. I would move to amend that we limit the number of available cannabis retail business license issued per separate business entity to a maximum of 1 license per business entity within the first year.
Okay. I think that motion is clear. So rather than a maximum of 2 per business entity, that would be a maximum of 1 per business entity. Okay. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I don't know if you want me to formalize this through a motion to table or some other motion that we haven't used at all yet, but respectfully, I'd love to defer this motion for a little bit, and I think I've got procedural ways to do that, but maybe I could just ask if we could do that. And the reason is I think there's a few of us that are still planning to make motions in terms of total caps, and what we decide there really changes how I'll be voting on this motion. So I'm wondering if there's a way to defer this motion.
I'll look to the mover and see if you'd be comfortable with that and have the discussion around it. It might be useful to discuss one issue, caps, and then follow up with the number available per entity. Is that you okay with that?
Sorry, yeah, I'm okay with it. Yeah, let's deal with the caps, and then we'll sort it all out from there.
Okay, so Councillor Thiessen will, with concurrence of council, and thanks for that, Councillor Thiessen, will withdraw that motion, and we'll deal with the item of caps on the number of business licenses to start. So is there another motion arising on that aspect?
Mayor Given, I have one if no one else is in the queue.
Sure, thanks very much, Councillor Clayton. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I agree that there does not appear to be the appetite in the room for an unlimited number. Therefore, I make a motion that to have the maximum number of allowable licenses be no greater than 15. So 15 be the max for the number of licenses.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Clayton. So that motion's clear. Motion to increase the number of available licenses in the first year from 10 to 15. Do we need a round of discussion and debate on that? By all rights, we can. Councillor Bressie?
Thank you. I'll discuss. I'll make a. I think that when we talked about this cap a couple minutes ago, there are a few things that were brought up, and one is concern about this market needs to be regulated. I'd agree with that, and there is a substantial regulation on this market from the provincial perspective, and I think a lot of those regulations, especially around security of the site and what's allowed and not allowed at the site, and education of staff working at the site, are very good and very important, and are going to mitigate a lot of social costs. So I agree that regulation is needed, but I think there's already sensible regulations in place. I fail to see how regulating the amount of these is going to do something that the provincial regulations aren't already doing. There's also talk about we might have an oversaturation of stores in town. We might see a lot open and then some go out of business. And I think if we had unlimited licenses, that absolutely would be very likely to happen. And I'd argue that that is a very good thing in our community. Often when you've got competition in a retail market, it comes down to price wars. And I don't think any of us want to see stores fighting for who can sell the cheapest cannabis. That being said, my understanding of the provincial rules is I don't think that's going to happen. You've got all these stores are buying from the same supplier, so you can't get any undercutting others due to economy of scale. You've got the AGLC is giving these retailers a mandate that they have to actually be businesses. And the AGLC also has legislated right to set a minimum price floor. I don't think the AGLC is going to be allowing these stores to compete on price. So that means they're going to be competing on things like how knowledgeable their staff are, how far they go out of their way to educate their consumers on what they're actually buying. Do they have a safe, clean-looking, and secure site? And all these other aspects that make a store more rather than less positive in our community are the things that they're going to have to compete on. I would argue that it would be really great to see the stores that aren't competing on these great social benefits go out of business, while the ones that are being very socially responsible rise to the top. I'm worried if we cap it, that's not going to happen. That we're going to have few enough stores open that all of them will be successful, or the majority of them will be successful, and that doesn't give a chance for the ones that have better stores, better staff, better education of their public to rise to the top and to be the main force in the market. So I really think that we're making a mistake if we don't allow free competition in this space, since competition won't be based on price. So I'll be voting for this motion, and whether there's room or not, I will be making a motion that we eliminate the cap altogether.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. That's obviously in order. Any other discussion or debate? Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I see this as a healthy compromise. It feels like we've got that amount of applicants in the queue. And yeah, I can support. I love unlimited, but we can also look at that again in a year. So I'm back to the cautious approach, and I think that we do have an obligation to be somewhat cautious here. So I'm fine with 15, and hopefully it gets limited to 1.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Plott. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I actually, I think 15 is a healthy compromise as well. And I'm still going to be following up with my other motion. And hopefully those customer service points and everything else will shine through for potentially 15 new business owners within our community. I do have a pushback to that free market statement, though. I mean, we're not that far off from Grande Prairie being branded as the most dangerous city in the entire country. Now, that may have a little something to do with the fact that we have nearly 50 liquor stores around our community. I'm not demonizing the alcohol industry, but what I'm saying is that alcohol leads to other social causes or incidents that happen, and highest drunken driving record, highest record of, or one of the highest for domestic violence. A lot of these can be born out of the use of drugs and alcohol. As far as I know about marijuana, it's not one of those substances that's going to make you choke someone out or get in a fight. But the truth be told, that there are some potential inherent social ills that are associated with it, and I don't want to see Grande Prairie climb in another negative stat category as we're decreasing our other ones. So I think the free market has helped determine where we were in those stats, and possibly because of the people who come and go and the transient nature of our town. But the fact of the matter is I'm willing to be cautious with Councillor Palat and settle on this happy medium, and I'll make my amendment for later. But I think more caution that we use now in the early stages will be better serving our community in later years.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I'll just, in terms of what is a reasonable compromise, I will say first up that I'm going to continue to not support an increase above 10 in the first year. And in terms of context, Ontario, as I understand it, Ontario's announced, when they announced their approach to cannabis, they're going to have a government retail system. Alberta has taken sort of more of a free market-based approach, which is understandable considering we're Albertans after all. But in the Ontario context, their approach says that they will have, I believe, 150 stores open by 2020. So doing really rough math, that's one per, on Ontario's population, that's 1 per 94,000 people. Ontario's taken an approach where they have 1 per 94,000 people. And we're suggesting that 10 isn't a reasonable compromise in the city of Grande Prairie. Whereas Councillor Thiessen identified, we do have some other reputational and societal risks. And we are also recognized as one of the youngest communities in Canada. So should one of the youngest communities in Canada that has these perceptual risks be one of the communities in Canada that also has, you know, a much higher ratio of cannabis stores per population, I continue to believe that 10 is an appropriate start. Based on the Ontario model, we might not even get one, which I don't think makes any sense. But I do believe that 10 is a reason, when we're thinking about the reasonableness of it, in that context, 1 per 94,000 in Ontario, 10 is a very, very reasonable number. In fact, it's generous. So that's why I continue to be supportive of that approach for the first year. And we can change and increase the number if we prove to be underserved. Is there anybody else in the queue that wishes to speak to this? I think this was Councillor Clayton's motion, and Councillor Clayton, I will make sure to come back to you to close if there is not anybody else in the room that wants to speak to it. Councillor Bressy.
I do want to speak to the perception that we can come back and change this in a year. And my worry with that is, as we've heard, we have a lot of businesses who have taken substantial risk, signing leases, spending thousands of dollars on lawyers, taking months and months of their time to dedicate themselves to these causes. And these are small local businesses. These are individuals, as I meet with them, they're not passionate about making a profit, isn't what I'm hearing from them. They're passionate about educating people, and they're passionate about being safe, positive retailers in our community. I think the risk is, if these businesses are denied for a year, they're not going to be coming back. They're not going to be, I think some of these businesses won't be able to wait a year and then come back. The ones that will be able to wait a year and come back are the larger businesses that aren't local, that maybe don't have the same passion and the same community social consciousness that some of our local young entrepreneurs have. So I'd push back a little bit that there might not be the same opportunity for the businesses we want here in a year as there is right now.
Thanks, Councillor Ressy. Any other discussion or debate? I see Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to your comparison of us to Ontario. You can't really compare what we're talking about here with large, superstore style retail outlets like they will have when they are provincially based. We are here talking about a little smaller. They're not going to have 16 people working there at any given time. So if you have that kind of a store, sure, one for 94,000 is fine. So I think that's just a bit of an apples to oranges comparison. I'm strongly with Councillor Bressie on this.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Friesen. I don't see anybody else in the queue, so I will go to Councillor Clayton to close.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I just encourage Council to think about this. We have continually been touted as the entrepreneurial city. We continue to have more small businesses per capita than most cities of our size across Canada. And at this point, to limit opportunity for small business owners seems contrary to what we've continued to be proud about in the Peace region. I strongly encourage Council to consider this. 15, we know from administration's report, is a suitable number. The demand is there. And this is a good turning point in regards to opening a discussion in the future to see if there is opportunities for more. And I think 10 is truly not enough. We've talked about prior council meetings about not encouraging a smaller number and driving up the prices potentially of licenses, similar to the taxi industry. And although I don't think the federal government or provincial government will allow it to get to that, I think that we owe it to our residents and our ratepayers and our small business owners to have an opportunity to enter the market. And 15 seems a minimal, reasonable starting point, in my opinion. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Clayton, for that close. So we'll move on to the vote again. Councillor Clayton will come to you at the end, but I will call for the vote of the council members that are here in attendance. Please vote on the amendment to increase the maximum number of licenses from 10 to 15 in the first year. And Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. And that motion does carry. And so that will take the maximum number of licenses available in the first year from 10 to 15. We'll move on to other business arising. Councillor Bressie.
Great. Well, I appreciate that we raised it, but I'm still going to move that we eliminate it altogether. And I think the arguments have been made, but one final one I'll bring up is we had this conversation about the perception of Grande Prairie. And my primary concern is what's best for our citizens that are actually here. That being said, perception is important to me as well. And I hate to mention Maclean's magazine and that article that I think that yearly article that I think doesn't paint a full picture. But since that's what a lot of people think about when they talk about the most violent cities in Canada, I think it's worth noting that the top 5 crimes they list in the report on the most dangerous cities are violent crime, homicide, sexual assault, firearms offenses, robbery, breaking and entering, fraud are the top crimes that they're considering. And some of those may be related to recreational substance use, but I think most of those are way more linked to the criminal black market that we have in our communities across Canada. And I really think my concern is outcompeting that black market with great retail stores that are passionate about educating their customers, that have secure locations, and are responsible community citizens. So that's the last thing I'll say about this topic, but I hope that we'll eliminate this cap altogether.
And so Councillor Bressie, you're making that as a motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Bressie makes a motion to eliminate the cap on the number of licenses in the first year, or sorry, altogether. Any other discussion or debate on the motion? Councillor Friesen?
Once again, you all know my opinion on this, but I do think that there are a number of areas where we are meant to regulate, and we have done a good job. We're addressing some regulations in our other bylaws, and certainly the federal and the provincial government have done a great job of some excellent tight regulations, and the area to do it, though, is not in limiting small business. I will support this motion.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Friesen. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I can appreciate where you guys are going with it, but I can't support it. Maybe a year's time from now I can, but I do like the cautious approach. I think 15 is the right number, and so I can't support the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Plott. Any other discussion or debate? Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, we've had a month here to think about this, and there's lots of stuff, new information coming out. I personally, down the road, would love to see an unlimited number of licenses issued. I am really stuck on the 15 even, but I will be not supporting this at this time. I think that we need to have at least 1 year of background information and see where we're at and see where our dollars are spent in enforcement and EMS services and stuff like that, if that's something that's going to even come up. So yeah, I won't be supporting this at this point in time.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Any other discussion or debate in the room? I don't see anybody. Councillor Clayton, did you want to have a chance to comment on Councillor Bressy's motion?
I will support this motion, as I've indicated prior. I think that there's an opportunity here for us to strongly encourage what people recognize as an entrepreneurial spirit. And I think that by limiting the number of licenses, we're creating a false value to licenses. And I don't think that was ever the government's intent, was to put a value to these number of the actual physical license. And so therefore, I think you all need to think about the opportunity that we're not allowing by restricting the number of licenses. Right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but administration said they said somewhere between 15 to 20 initially. And you're not supporting 20, you've got 15. But really, as everybody has mentioned, we don't have a lot of statistical data on this. Therefore, I think that, I don't think we're being irresponsible by limiting the number of licenses. By not limiting the number of licenses. I think that it's allowing us to be have an opportunity for small business and entrepreneurs to really thrive in our region. So I will support the motion.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Clayton, for that close. I will call for the vote again. We'll follow the same process. We'll go with the folks that are in the room here and then come to Councillor Clayton. Please vote on Councillor Bressy's motion to remove the limit on the number of licenses available. Please vote now. Okay, Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. And that motion, adding Councillor Clayton's vote, receives 3 votes in favor and 5 votes opposed. So that motion does not carry. Are there any other motions related to the number of licenses available? I think we've started at a small number. We've gone all the way to unlimited, so there can't be anything left in between. I think we'll say that we'll move on to the motion that Councillor Thiessen had brought up previously. And Councillor Thiessen, I'll let you make that motion again to introduce it.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given, and I would move that Council limit the number of available cannabis retail business license issued per separate business entity to a maximum of 1 license per business within the first year. In speaking to this, Councillor Clayton has mentioned over the phone the entrepreneurial spirit, the pioneer spirit. I think this will open the door for everybody to have an equal footing getting into the cannabis market locally here in Grande Prairie. It doesn't give anybody that extra store heads up to start conglomerating all the other businesses that may or may not survive within 3 to 5 years. I just think it's a more fair process. This way too, kind of like helps to limit the use of the lottery. I would imagine. From what I've heard, different numbers thrown around. There's been 22. There's been 17. I've heard a whole bunch of numbers thrown around for people who have actually registered with AGLC. I've heard that one business owner is registered for 5 businesses. So we start subtracting the multiples, and then we might find that we are only going to get 10 businesses that are going to apply and hopefully do well. And I just think it's a fair market, and it's a fair free market by supporting this motion. So I thank you for your consideration.
Thanks very much. So Councillor Thiessen makes a motion to see that there would be a maximum of 1 license per business entity available. Open for discussion and debate. Seeing nobody in the room, ringing in. Councillor Clayton, did you wish to have any discussion or debate on that motion?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I will call for the vote on Councillor Thiessen's motion. Please vote. Thank you. And Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. That motion carries with 7 votes in favor and 1 vote opposed. And those are the amendments to the second reading. I believe we now need to have a vote on second reading, unless there are any other amendments to the business license bylaw. Councillor Bressy.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I've got a question, and then I've got a comment for administration. Or sorry, I've got a comment and a question for administration. And my comment that isn't related to that question is just we're still charging a $2,500 licensing fee, and that's something for reasons that have been shared. I don't think makes sense. It's something that we don't charge for other industries when we're updating our legislation to respond to senior levels of government, and I'm not buying that we're going to have significant ongoing costs. So I still think that fee isn't appropriate, and we shouldn't be charging that. That being said, I made an impassioned plea last council meeting, and I got roundly defeated by that, so I'm not going to make a motion just for the sake of obstruction, but I'd encourage my other colleagues. I'd love somebody else to make that motion so I could support it, but I won't make a motion just for the sake of making a motion. My question for administration is, if this law didn't pass, where would that leave cannabis retail stores? Would that mean that they wouldn't be allowed at all in Grande Prairie, or would that mean they just have the exact same rules as any other retailer in Grande Prairie?
Mr. Manuel.
Just a clarifying question there. If it doesn't pass at council or doesn't pass federally?
Sorry, if it doesn't pass here at council.
The amendments to the business license bylaw.
Yeah, certainly. So without the authorization for cannabis stores within the business license bylaw, essentially we would not permit. Actually, sorry, let me rephrase that. So if you permit it under land use and you have no provisions excluding it under your business license bylaw, there would be no regulation regarding that, similar to other retail stores in the city presently. But that being said, there is a revised business license bylaw that's under draft right now, coming back through the IPS committee, that involves licensing all industries. So, consideration.
But just to clarify, if this law gets defeated, cannabis retail stores would be able to open when it's legalized federally.
Correct, unless it was explicitly prohibited.
Subject to appropriate land use and physical development permits.
Correct.
Great. Well, in that case, I'll be voting against second reading of this. I think that I don't support the limiting of retail store hours. I don't support the fee, and I don't support the cap. So I'll be voting against this bylaw altogether.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Move on to Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. There is one other amendment I wanted to consider. It's now the time to do that.
Absolutely.
So I did throw out last meeting the idea of cannabis store hours being unfairly limited, and one of the stats that I brought forward, I think Mr. Dombrova mentioned as well tonight, and that's that something like 39% of people thought that we should be closing these down at 10, but 46% of respondents thought that it was fine to stay open later, and the next allowable time to vote for in there was midnight. So I did put out last meeting that I would like to see the cannabis retail stores be open from the hours of 10 a.m. till 2 a.m. and was fairly soundly defeated. But I would like to look at this again, and I think that I will move tonight. And I understand the concern, certainly, that the Chamber of Commerce brought to us last meeting, and that was that there's a fair amount of concern over criminal element or loitering and that sort of thing that happens in the later hours with liquor stores. So liquor stores tend to close earlier, and I think that our cannabis retailers, if they were experiencing similar problems and felt that they should close earlier, certainly they would. But I don't think that we should arbitrarily and unilaterally limit them by the bylaw. And you all know, because I've spoken tonight about areas where I think we do need to regulate and areas where we don't. This is an area where I think we do not need to regulate, when we've heard from our residents that they are not opposed at all to cannabis being open later than what we have here. So I would like to propose that an amendment be made to 2A, that cannabis retail stores may set its hours of operation between the maximum allowable hours of 10 a.m. and midnight, Monday through Sunday. The store may operate reduced hours.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Friesen. So the essence of that motion is to allow the stores to operate any time that their AGLC license would allow them to operate. Can I suggest that it might be just as effectively to remove the operating hour restrictions from the bylaw altogether? Because then, it would have the same effect.
I think that that's a fantastic suggestion. So perhaps then we remove any further restriction than AGLC has within our city. So how would that be then worded? Maybe.
I'm sorry.
So
you're saying, I think the effect of your motion was that the operating hours be up to the maximum allowable by AGLC.
that was mine last meeting. This meeting, I said, well, midnight, because that one didn't pass. But I would sure love to see that happen. I'm just not sure that I will get support around the table for that, which is why I said to midnight.
Okay. Just want to clarify the motion. Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine.
Geez, here I thought you were going to maybe
I just want to clarify the intent there.
get on board with something a little more permissive, Mayor Given.
Not a chance. No. Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Mayor Given. My questions, I guess, maybe for administration on this. I would like to support the motion. The area where I don't want to support this motion is now that we have allowed it in local commercial or neighborhood commercial, I guess. Would we be able to accept an application, but in those certain areas, so your hours are limited to a lower time?
Mr. Mano?
Yep, that's absolutely something we can do. It can be specified that within local commercial or even within specific distances, it affects the hours of operation. It can be a condition of license for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Platt. Councillor O'Toole.
So the way it reads now, the AGLC hours are from 10 until 2 in the morning. And that's what the proposed, your proposal would be.
10 to midnight is Councillor Friesen's proposal. It was my error in misinterpreting it.
Oh. You're never supposed to admit an error.
It's always good to admit it up front.
At least you can change your votes.
So now I got the microphone active. I would be very supportive of different areas have different times that they can stay open. So different areas such as commercial versus residential area, stuff like that, that I would like to see the Protective Services Board be able to identify those hours. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. Just along this line of thought, a question for administration is if that was something that council wanted to look at, especially in the local commercial districts, does that have to be specified by bylaw, or can that be imposed at the development permit phase when it's discretionary use?
Mr. Manuel.
So the chief licensing inspector actually does have the authority to put conditions on licenses. That this would fall within that authority, and if council or the IPS committee wanted to make that specific direction, certainly that can be done outside of a bylaw amendment.
Okay. Any other discussion or debate? Seeing none. Councillor Clayton, did you have a comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Clayton. So we'll call for the vote on Councillor Friesen's motion to increase the allowable operating hours to 12 a.m. Please vote. Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. That motion carries with 5 in favor, including Councillor Clayton, and 3 opposed. That's our operating hours. Were there any other amendments with respect to the business license bylaw? I don't see anybody in the queue. If there weren't any other amendments, then we'll move on to a vote on second reading as amended. And so I will call for the vote on second reading with that sort of tranche of amendments that were made. I will call for the vote now, and we'll come to Councillor Clayton at the end. Please vote. Thank you. Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. And that motion carries with 6 in favor and 2 opposed. Can I have a motion for third reading of the business license bylaw? I have a motion for third reading. Councillor O'Toole.
That motion. Council give 3 readings to bylaw C1064H, being an amendment to the business license bylaw.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. So motion for third reading. Is there any discussion or debate on third reading of the business license bylaw amendments related to cannabis? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Sorry, Councillor Clayton, I went on this.
I'm in favor.
Thank you. Thank you. My apologies, Councillor Clayton. I appreciate that that was probably the case. So that carries with 6 in favor and 2 opposed. That'll take us to item 7.3, bylaw amendments to the smoke-free playgrounds and athletic fields bylaw. And I think we can ask Councillor Minhas to come back in now that we've dealt with all the business-related regulations. And I'll look to, I see Councillor Palat in the queue.
Mayor Given, I think process only allows me to vote on one item. I don't know if I'm allowed to stay on.
Yeah, that's right, Councillor Clayton. I think it is just the one item that that you're able to call in for. So thank you very much for calling in this evening and participating, making sure that you're able to participate in some of the important decisions, even though you're out representing the city of Grande Prairie at another event. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Okay. So that last motion was a motion to actually pass third reading because we were doing we were not attempting to have all 3 readings in the same night. So we'll move on to Councillor Palat for second reading of the smoke-free playgrounds and athletic fields bylaw. Councillor Palat.
I guess I was more going to make a comment that I'm wondering if this has as much urgency now that I feel like the other 2 being passed can let industry do their things. I don't know if we need to rush this one. So in light of some of the conversation that has happened tonight around some of the smoking changes, I will kind of leave it to the rest of the council to see what they want to do. But I guess if there's an appetite to table it, I'd be fine with that. If not, I'd look at making some motions to change it.
Well, so council can make a motion to table something, or council can make a motion to amend something. I think in either case, you need to be able to speak to the intent behind why, the whys of it. I see a list of folks here, and I do see administration sort of pop in there. So I'm going to go to administration if they had some advice on this for us. Mr. Manuel.
So certainly. So it's my understanding that off our May 22nd council meeting, we're back here tonight more or less for procedural sake. So we weren't looking at any specific amendments from coming out of that May 22nd meeting related to cannabis. And what's been presented here tonight, again, frankly, isn't related to cannabis amendments. It's strengthening the bylaw as it pertains to other smokables and in strengthening the tobacco provisions. And that is certainly nothing that in administration has considered to this point. It wasn't our objective behind the amendment to the legislation. So I would suggest if that's the direction that council chooses to go tonight, I would recommend that we do bring it back with that consideration.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Manuel. So I've got a few people in the queue. I see some dropping off, a few dropping off like flies. So I'll skip through. I see Councillor O'Toole has been consistent in being in the queue. Councillor O'Toole.
Mayor Given, we had a presentation by Mr. Les Hagen, and I would really like administration to review those suggestions that he gave in his handout, and maybe we'll table this till or come back with another date when this has been reviewed by administration.
So once again, we'll have to do things by motion.
I'd make that motion.
To table it. So tabling is typically for additional information to come forward. If there's different work that we want management to do, then I think we need to tell them that.
And I think my motion would do that, review the information that's in the briefing here. and to come back with some recommendations or to include them.
So, okay, you can make that motion, and I will speak to why I think I'm not sure that that's appropriate, and I'll speak to that in the debate. So Councillor O'Toole makes a motion to table this. I think you need to identify when you intend to table it to.
Well, even postpone this to another date, and I don't know if that's, I don't think we want to deal with it tonight, obviously. So I would like to postpone it to another time when administration's got enough time to review it.
Okay. So as Mr. Manuel just identified, the recommendations here actually don't necessarily impact our regulation of cannabis consumption. They are specific to increasing the regulation around other types of smoking consumption. I think that's worthy of consideration. But I think that it is, and it can be added at any time. I think that it shouldn't impair our ability to put in a system that starts to communicate to the public what our expectations around cannabis consumption will be. So basically we're saying, well, we're not going to deal with cannabis consumption at all because we might do something with respect to tobacco consumption in the future. So I just, to think about that, there's the recommendations around tobacco can absolutely be considered, reviewed at committee, and added to the bylaw with appropriate consideration without impacting the cannabis regulations that are being proposed here.
Would you like to go through 7.3 and deal with that tonight and put this in administration's hands to deal with this at another time?
Well, I think that like I say, that's, council can make the motion to table. You have to, if you're going to table it, you need to say to when, or to, you can't just say table it to time indefinite. You have to have a direction. Tabling is typically to a date specific.
And we're not in a big hurry to deal with this one right now, 7.3?
Depends on how much notice you think we need to give the community about how we're going to regulate consumption of cannabis. If you think that we should wait until it becomes legal and then announce how we're going to regulate its consumption, then
I'd like to table it for 1 month.
Okay. Okay. So a motion to table consideration of second reading bylaw C-1278B for 1 month's time. That motion is open for discussion and debate. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm not going to support the motion. I think we can take care of all this cannabis stuff here and allow that to set the trends for vaping and tobacco use in our future. And this is just a simple referral to committee from Mr. Hagan. I really appreciate him bringing this in and using cannabis as that sort of lever to pull it with. And I'm saying this, and I hate to admit it in public, I'm saying this as someone who's trying to quit smoking, but is a longtime smoker. No, I've been trying for 20 years. Thank you very much. But anyways, no, I won't support it.
Sorry, point of privilege.
Sure, Councillor Bessie.
I just want to point out that in our procedure bylaw, motions table is not debatable.
Okay. Sure. So we can vote on the motion immediately. I'm comfortable doing that. Council members, if you're comfortable voting on it without sitting position, absolutely. Let's vote on Councillor O'Toole's motion. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does not carry. Can I have a motion for second reading of bylaw C-1278B? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I would move that council give second reading to bylaw C-1278B, being an amendment to the smoke-free playgrounds and athletic fields bylaw. Speaking to that motion, I suppose, I just wanted to commend council for astutely changing the separation distance for smokable cannabis products and potentially future other smokable products around playgrounds, wherever children may occupy. I think 30 meters, aka 100 feet, is a pretty decent distance and involves enough separation for that. So thank you for the work that you did there.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. Any other discussion or debate on the motion? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'm gonna be voting in favor of this. That being said, I am supportive of the recommendations that were being made. So my intention is when we get to the delegation portion of the business to make a motion that we defer these to the appropriate standing committee to come back and go through that process. So I am supportive of those recommendations. I'm also supportive of pass this bylaw tonight. I think we already thought that we passed it, and then we had to come back for procedural reasons. And I just think it's weird to go back to the community and say, no, we haven't passed it, and we don't know when we're going to pass it. So I'll be voting in favor.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'm not going to support the bylaw. And the reason is that I think 30 meters is a big leap from 10 meters. And I'd like to see it a little less than that, particularly when we are starting to consider, now that this is leading the way for other smoking bylaws, I'm just not sure that we need to go quite as big a distance as that. So I won't support it, but I also recognize that the majority of my colleagues are in favor of that. So I'm not going to bother with any kind of amendment, but I won't support the bylaw. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Friesen. Any other discussion or debate? Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'll support the motion. I was heading down the same path as Councillor O'Toole, and I guess I got educated on how we can just refer it to a committee. I didn't know that we could do that. I thought we had to table something, so my apologies of kind of starting that. But I think as long as we can capture that with committee and we can get these changes in there, I'd be happy with that.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Platt. Any other discussion or debate? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote on second reading of Bylaw C 1278B. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries 6-2, and can I have a motion for third reading? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I would move that Council give third reading to Bylaw C-1278B, being an amendment to the smoke-free playgrounds and athletic fields bylaw.
Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. That motion is open for discussion and debate. Is there any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote on the amendment to the smoke-free playgrounds and athletic fields bylaw. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries again 6-2. And that'll take us to item 7.4, Bylaw C 1293A, an amendment to the minimum property standards bylaw. This one we're looking for a motion for third and final reading. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I move the council give third reading to Bylaw C-1293A, being an amendment to the minimum property standard bylaw.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Do we need a refresher from administration on what this entails? It's been a month since we were here last, Mr. Manuel.
So what's before you right now is what we call the personal production of cannabis. This is one of the points up for discussion tonight at the Senate, but the House of Commons seems content with permitting up to 4 cannabis plants to be grown at a residence. And as such, the municipality has a right to put some provisions on that. So what the minimum property standards bylaw does is essentially create a personal cannabis cultivation license that just has some reasonable measures in it to protect youth access and prevent theft and prohibit dangerous manufacturing processes. The only question arising from the May 22nd council meeting, as I understood it, was clarity around what the potential penalties for noncompliance would be. And what's proposed is a specified penalty of $250 if somebody was not to obtain a permit after having been advised that they need to obtain a permit. And for more serious violations, such as a potential commercial grow operation, or illicit commercial grow operation, I should say, one that's not authorized, the minimum property standards has a general penalty provision which allows a judge, after a mandatory court appearance, to make a ruling and impose a fine of up to $10,000 1 year imprisonment or potentially both if it was a real significant instance.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Manuel. And so did I get a motion for third reading there? I think Councillor O'Toole, is that correct? Thank you. So is there any discussion or debate on third reading? Councillor Pressy.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'll be voting in opposition to this. I really don't like us regulating what's going on that is legal in a private home unless we've got very clear contributions to public safety to do so. And I'm not convinced that this is going to help us do that. I think that the people who apply for permits will be the people that tend to will be following federal regulations anyways. And I think that those who are going to do this dangerously or irresponsibly, I don't think the need for a municipal permit is going to get in their way. So I'm really leery of us asking people what they're doing in their private homes that's legal unless we have a very clear reason to do that. I don't think we have that here, so I'm going to be voting in opposition.
Thanks, Councillor Pressy. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I just have a question. I'm curious about why the court case reference, the judge's imposition of a fine up to $10,000 needs to be in our bylaw.
That general penalty provision exists in every bylaw. It's it gives the courts the ability to deal with there's circumstances that fall outside of $100 fine, for instance, where something was. I'll use an animal attack as an example, right? There's an animal attack where a dog nips somebody in the hand, and it perhaps justifies the $100 or $250 fine. And then there's complete maulings, which result in the death of people at times. And it lets a judge recognize the severity of the incident and have a ruling in accordance with previous precedents and other communities and whatnot. So it's there for a degree of flexibility. Again, assessing that fine is not something that's done by myself, an officer, counsel. It's a provincial court judge after consideration to all the facts.
Thanks, Mr. Manuel. Any other discussion or debate on third reading? Seeing nobody in the queue, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries with 7 in favor and 1 opposed. I believe that handles all of our items under unfinished business and will bring us to our reports, which are our additional items. And the first is 8.1, Aquaterra appointments. I'll look to our city manager for an introduction.
Thank you, Mayor Given. The Aquaterra Board of Directors, Board of Directors for Aquaterra Utilities, Inc. has approached the city. There are 3 vacancies on the Aquaterra board, and it is processed that the board approaches the city and requests that the city cast the shareholder or the share that the city owns in favor of replacements for those board members that will not be returning. The slate of directors has been advanced for consideration by the city, and it is appropriate for there to be a motion that would allow the mayor to cast the vote in favor of the slate of directors for the Aquaterra board.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. City Manager. So basically, I'm looking for council to tell me what to do. I get my authority to vote the city shares with the direction of council, and so I'd look for a motion directing me to vote the slate as recommended by the Aquaterra nominating committee and as reviewed by the 3 elected officials, chief elected officials from the city, county, town, and would also note that the County of Grande Prairie has already passed this motion at their previous council meeting. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. And saying all that, and in light of our discussion earlier, I would move that council approve the appointments of shareholders for 3 directors to the Board of Aquaterra. First being Andy Fraser to a 3-year term to 2021. Second being Rob Mackin to a 3-year term to 2021. And third being Lionel Laflamme to a 1-year term to 2019.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. Any discussion or debate on the motion? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. And next up was item 8.2, appointments to the Combative Sports Commission. I believe we had 2 commission members inform us that they were going to have to resign their positions. Councillor O'Toole, do you have those names that were being recommended?
I don't have their names. Don and Rory is Don's first name. I'm not sure what Rory. Lapunga?
Sure. So if I look, I believe...
Never got that.
We do have it, in fact.
I have it rushed to me via courier. Yes, so just to speak on the 2 nominations.
Maybe just make the motion.
Yeah, I move that council can move the council add 2 members to the Combative Sports Commission, one being Don Mabunga and the other being Rory Tarrant.
For a term ending December 31st, 2020?
Yes.
Thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Any discussion or debate on that motion?
Just that both of them have, well, the people that have left the community. So they didn't leave on bad things. Actually, they were really excellent commission members. They just got jobs that were in different communities. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Any other discussion or debate on that motion? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. And that'll take us into committee business, starting with item 9.1, the Community Living Committee meeting from May 22nd. Councillor Thiessen, is that your set of minutes?
I think it is, and I would move that council receive the minutes from the Community Living Committee meeting held May 22nd, 2018, as presented.
Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. Any discussion or debate on that set of minutes? Are there any errors or omissions we need to correct? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor Thiessen.
And no items coming out of decision from that committee meeting, and it seems a long time ago. We had many delegations that day, as we had here today. We have no more delegations sitting in our gallery right now, but we had presentations from the John Howard Society, as they do with their annual presentation for the Tabino kids. We also had a presentation from PARDS, the Grand Prairie Public Library, the Peace Library System, and then we really got into the meat of it, talking with Grand Prairie Regional Tourism Association and the Philip J. Currie Dinosaur Museum, meeting their new executive director, Susan Hunter, for the Dinosaur Museum. That was pretty good. But actually, with all those items coming forward to us and all those delegations appearing, it sort of made us put things off for another day. So tomorrow we will be dealing with 3 of the items that were on that meeting that we just didn't have the time to deal with in that day, especially with the sensitive in-camera item that was longly discussed following that. And that'll be the roller derby facility analysis, the Arm's Length Housing Corporation, and the Low-Income Recreation Access Program, among other items. So really looking forward to that discussion tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Move on to 9.2, the Corporate Services Committee meeting from May 22nd. Councillor O'Toole, is that yours?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Given. I move the council receive the minutes of the Corporate Services Committee meeting held Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018, as presented.
Thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Is there any discussion or debate or errors or omissions on that set of minutes?
That looks good to me.
If it looks good to Councillor O'Toole, I guess I'm good.
I can just tell you that we did have 2 audits, or we had an audit done through the municipal affairs. We passed with flying colors with just a few little tweaks that are through procedures, but nothing to cause us any grief. And then we had our quarterly unaudited financial statement for the period ending March 31st read out to us, and we looked at that, and once again, it's in good shape as well.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. So I will call for the vote on Councillor O'Toole's motion to adopt that set of minutes. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries, and that'll take us to the Infrastructure and Protective Services Committee meeting from May 29th. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I would move that Council receive the minutes of the Infrastructure and Protective Services Committee meeting held Tuesday, May 29th, 2018, as presented.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Blackburn. Are there any errors or omissions that we need to address before we adopt that set of minutes? Again, seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor Blackburn, anything you wanted to highlight from that set of minutes?
I will just mention very briefly that we had reports at that meeting from Emergency Services and the RCMP on their Q1 updates, and I would commend those organizations for the work that they've done and the amount of detail that they provided to us that goes to show that we're in good hands.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Blackburn. And Councillor Blackburn, are you going to step in as well on item 9.4, Infrastructure and Protection Services from June 12th?
Thank you, Mayor Given. I would move that Council receive the minutes of the Infrastructure and Protective Services Committee meeting held Tuesday, June 12th, 2018 as presented.
Thanks very much, Councillor Blackburn. Any errors or omissions, anything we need to amend? Again, seeing nothing, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor Blackburn, anything to highlight?
It was a very short meeting. I have nothing to highlight.
Thanks very much. Okay, so I think that gets us through our committee business. We have no items of correspondence this evening. In terms of delegation business, now here's our opportunity. There was a presentation, a number of them were related to cannabis, although one was the action on smoking and health. So this would be the item to refer. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I would move that we refer the item of smoke-free public places presented by Mr. Hagan to the most appropriate committee.
Okay. Thanks very much. Councillor Thiessen, any discussion or debate on that motion of referral? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Were there any other motions arising? We did have, other than the cannabis ones, we did also have the presentation from Heartland Petrochemical Complex, and perhaps we could receive that for information. Councillor Friesen?
Yeah, I would like to move that we receive for information the presentation by Karen Vasquez of Interpipeline.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Friesen. Any discussion or debate on that motion? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. I believe that was all of our delegation business. We gave away some bikes. I don't know that we need to receive that for information. And the rest were all cannabis related. I don't believe we have any notices of motion this evening. And so we would move into council member reports from our external agencies, boards and commissions, and council. With our late start tonight, I didn't get a chance to ask council members. So if you have a report from one of your committees, I'll just ask you to ring in. And we'll go in the order that you ring in, and we'll start with Councillor Bressy.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Last Friday, I had the privilege of going to the Intercity Forum on Social Policy. I was told that Chris Thiessen was missed many times. I got to hear that. I got to say he's really bummed he's not here, and he's sadder than you are. It was also fun. We got to hear from a few provincial officials and from the Associate Minister of Health, and about 3 times it was mentioned by the province that there's now a municipal official appointed to the Task Force on Opioid Awareness. The province is pretty proud of that. It was fun to go, yeah, that's my mayor. And so I thought I'd report that. I think the 2 interesting pieces of tidbits I got were there's councillors and officials in the room from cities that have safe consumption sites, and we got to talk about the learnings that they've had from that. And I think the most useful thing I heard is Calgary's been very successful with community liaison committees, where they struck a committee comprised of a few councillors, a few city staff, a few of the representatives of the nonprofits who are taking care of the consumption site, and of representatives of the community associations and the business community involved in the localized area. And that committee doesn't have any decision-making authority, anything like that, but it's an advisory committee. And the 2 ways they're using it is meeting quarterly. It's an easy way for them to get information out there to various stakeholders before rumors or any ill will can grow in the community. It also has been a great source of advice for the city and the nonprofits to use. So as we look at consumption sites, maybe that's a model we want to look at. I think the other thing that was really interesting is we learned about a UN Safe Cities for Women and Girls initiative, where this is a worldwide initiative to make our streets and our public spaces safer for some vulnerable members of our population. It's a worldwide thing, and right now Edmonton is becoming the 3rd city in Canada to join this initiative. What's really interesting is they're hosting an annual conference on this in October. They're the first developed country ever to host Safer Cities for Women and Girls conference. It's going to have about 250 delegates, including about 125 international delegates. It's something that I think I'm going to try to attend and learn more about. And there's 3 cities doing this in Canada. Maybe it'd be fun to be the 4th city, and maybe it'd be fun and good if we were the first mid-sized city to join this worldwide initiative. So that was interesting to learn more about, and I'm excited to bring more to you. The one kind of business piece that I'll bring to you is we did have a discussion about how this group is funded. Right now, what happens is all the cities take turns renting the room and paying for lunch for everyone, and that means you have a very big bill every few years, which isn't very predictable. And the other issue that's going on right now is the administrative resources for this group are provided by the chair of the committee. What that's led to in the past is Calgary and Edmonton have been the only groups to chair this. And I think that's partly because some of us smaller cities, we don't want to bear the whole cost of this group. So we had a discussion about maybe we need to look at the funding model of this, make it more predictable and spread the cost fairer. And that's something I'm personally supportive in. I like being more predictable. I like carrying our share. And so I suspect that after our meeting in September, I'm going to be coming to you guys with a financial ask for this committee. And so I thought I'd give you a heads up about that.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. If you didn't have any other committees to report on, then we'll move to Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Just a quick report on the Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance. We had our annual general meeting on May the 25th, Friday, May the 25th. And there was, as per usual, a discussion about the watersheds, introduction of new members, the election of the board. I retained my seat as the vice chair, although I had to turn down the offer of chair because, well, it's just really busy right now. I don't mind stepping in when I have to, but it's a great organization. During that AGM, we received a presentation from Sarah Skinner from the Battle River Watershed Alliance, and she did a report on Camrose's Source Water Protection Plan, which, as you guys know from most of my reports about the Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance, that's sort of the direction that we're going, encouraging people to develop their own source water protection plans along the Peace River so that we can map it, without having to pay the high expensive LIDAR, especially since we're an underfunded organization with minimal staff. We also received a presentation from Monica Benoit from the Peace Country Beef and Forage Association, and she gave a presentation on stewardship from a producer's perspective, basically cattle farming and understanding the holisticness of, what was the word that she used? It was, anyways, I'll remember later, but it was great, and the importance of water that she's learning more and more about every single day, and we may have got a future member there. And besides that, we did go over tentative plans for our WPAC summit, of which I take off to for Peace River for the next 4 days, to go join with other watersheds from around the province to discuss the very vital force that water is to each and every one of our lives, and how we can improve it within our own watershed boundaries. I did give a little pep talk to the entire board before we broke up, saying that as we are very underfunded year over year, and usually waiting 3 months without any payments from the province coming in. Although it's there, it just never arrives until August, when we've had to lay off people for 2 months and say have a good summer vacation. I did say we have lots of stakeholders around there, and the city of Grande Prairie is one of them. So I think they are going to be coming forward with a request for a budget for some operational funding to help them get through the tough, tight times that we experience every single year. So much like Councillor Bressie, my group is probably going to be coming forward with a funding request as well. And that is all that I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I have 2 committees to report on. The first one being Grand Spirit Foundation. We met on the 25th of May, and I won't go into a lot of detail except to say that we're looking at our 2019 budget already. For those people who have friends or relatives in Lakeview, in Claremont, and who understand that there have been problems with television and internet service there, we're pleased to report that a solution has been found, and they're working on that finally. And the other thing to mention is that a new facility is going to be erected in Spirit River affordable housing, and Grand Spirit Foundation is going to manage that project. The next thing I want to mention is the library meeting, and we were given our 2017 year in review statistics, and there's only a couple that I want to share with you because I want to just show how well our library is used and how it deserves the support that we give them. There's over 18,600 members of the Public Library in Grande Prairie, 5,000 adults, 388 teens, and 2,587 children took part in programs offered by the library over the past year. And there were over 458,000 items borrowed from the library, 45,000 of which were e-books and e-audiobooks. They've got 81 volunteers, and it's a great asset for our community. The other thing that I will mention is that we received the resignation of Maureen Curry, our executive director. Maureen and her husband have taken an opportunity in Ontario, where her husband is from, and she will be leaving us at the end of August. She's been a great asset for the library in the 4.5 years that she's been with us, and there will be big shoes to fill. That's my report. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. I have just one. There was a Disabled Transportation Society meeting last week, and they're working on operationally shoring up some safety training and getting some uniforms with high visibility, that sort of thing. So some really important foundational needs that they're working on meeting. Also, the competition for the executive director has closed, and they're moving into interviewing for that position. And there were 2 or 3 very good candidates out of the applications received. So that's it for them. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Friesen. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I had a downtown association meeting. It was nice to hear that the construction project is on time currently. There will be a press release coming out this week regarding the road closure on 102nd and 100th, which I think is going to be going to just westbound traffic for a bit, but it will be closed in about, I think, a week and a half's time permanently. So there'll be some signage going up and some information going out about that. There was some conversation about the bollards on 101st, and just I think some administration's working on a plan of what we're going to do with those moving forward. And there was really it was nice to hear, because it's something we were very concerned about when we were all campaigning, and then with this council. But really positive feedbacks about Monty and his role. And from talking to some of the businesses, it's nice. They've been having regular meetings, people coming in reminding them, hey, take your picture off the wall. We're going to be closing your sidewalks today. So the communication is definitely working, and it was nice to hear that that Monty's working out really well. So yeah, that's a report for downtown.
Good. Thanks, Councillor Platt. Councillor O'Toole.
I got a couple items here that I'd like to report on. There will be an MMA event held on August 11th, and at this present time, I can't remember the name of it, but it will be on a Saturday night. And I'm really actually not going to tell you the name of it so you don't make any funny jokes. So
like you're part of council meeting.
I know. So I just blew your parade all up. I did attend the Northern Alberta Mayors and Reeves Caucus this last Thursday and Friday in Whitecourt. We had a Minister of Agriculture and Forestry, O'Neill Cartler, and he spoke a little bit on the use of agriculture land being used up for commercial, and that was a real sore subject with him. But he didn't really give us any answers there. So the conversation was actually quite short. And I did drill him a little bit on tourism dollars. I just mentioned to him that a good portion of the tourism dollars that are collected in the northern Alberta region go towards supporting the national parks, both Jasper and Banff. And basically those are federal parks and we're given provincial money to promote them. I felt that they're already doing really good. I'd like to see more money coming to the northern Alberta to support some of the festivals and supporting the trails up here that could bring people off the beaten path and go into and explore the other areas of the province beside the mountains. And I don't think he really liked that comment, but anyhow, that's where it left. And I did attend an SPCA meeting today, and it sounds like maybe there's going to be something happening, an announcement here happening soon. So we'll talk about that next month. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. I think that was all, if I don't see anybody else in the queue, and so I think that's all of our roundtable reports, or sorry, committee council member reports. Do we have any other items that council members wanted to cover in terms of council member roundtable? Then seeing that there's not, Councillor Friesen, thank you.
Thank you very much. I went to the second annual Grand Prairie Traditional Powwow yesterday, and I had gone last year as well to the first annual, and it was wonderful to see how much it has grown. So they had at its peak about the better part of 1,500 attendees, and a lot of them were from out of town. And they were quite delighted and that I turned up. I actually took Mum and dug out there, but they were really glad that I showed up because they had a thank you gift for the city. So I'd like to present to you, Mayor Given, the Treaty 8 flag, which they're really hoping will fly at City Hall.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
And just if anyone happens to see Walter White's Facebook post about the Treaty 8 flag going missing, it's not that one. It was a different one. He gave that one to me.
Thanks very much, Councillor Friesen, and thanks for representing the City of Grande Prairie at that event. If there weren't any other roundtable reports, then I will ask for council. We had one in-camera item from prior that we didn't get an opportunity to discuss, and so before the close of the council meeting, I'll ask for a motion to go in camera. Councillor O'Toole?
I'll make that motion, Mayor Given, to go in camera.
Okay, thanks very much. And I'll just look to our city manager to highlight the staff.
The city clerk's office to stay to make sure that the matter is properly recorded. We'll ask Mr. Harvard to stay as well, and Mr. Bork to stay with us as well. The directors, the full directors will stay and make sure that there are appropriate resources for council.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. City Manager. So we'll close off our broadcast and